Welcome back to the live show. Good evening. It is currently 6:51 p.m. and today's date is October 1st, 2024. And of course, it is the vice presidential debate day. Everybody's waiting to hear from Team Walls and JD Vance. Okay? All right. As you see behind me is a new background. We had to move from the other Airbnb that we were in to another Airbnb. But God is in control 100%. And then yes, God is in control 100%. All right. Like I always say, because I am not home, the internet may not be as excellent as it should be. So my video may be a little blurry or buffering or lagging or anything you want to call it. However, the show must go on. Okay. The show must go on. But thank you so much, man. As I always say, never ever stop going, never give up. Keep believing in yourself and in God and in your talent, in whatever you're doing. Just keep believing, okay? All right, so straight to the straight to the show. All right. The former president, the 45th, some people say he might be the 47th. Donald J. Trump delivers a remark to the press in Wisconsin today. All right. So let's listen. Let's listen in and see what he has to say.
We're leading in the state, and with Tommy's help, we're going to win the state, and with everyone else's help also, we're going to win it. We won it once. We had great primaries here, and we think we did really fantastically another time. But we think we're going to win it very big. With tremendous enthusiasm. We've never had the enthusiasm that we have right now. So I just want to thank Governor Thompson, and thanks as well to Congressman Brian Stile. Thank you very much, Brian, for the job. Appreciate it. And everyone else for being here today. It's a very impressive looking group of media. This is largely a press conference. It's a big press conference. I was surprised they got that much hand. I don't know, were they clapping? Because I was very impressive. No, I was impressed, actually. But now, a lot of respect. We have to be together. Before we begin, I want to send our love to the millions of people who are still suffering from the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. Yesterday, I was in Georgia to survey the terrible damage from the storm. It was terrible. And Georgia was hit very, very hard. They're doing a great job. Governor's doing a great job. Everybody, they're all working together. And we helped them out a little bit. In North Carolina, the biggest problem seems to be like zero communication. The poles are all down, the wires are all down. And they asked me whether or not I could help with Starlink. It's another genius concept of Elon Musk. And I called Elon, and they were having a hard time getting it. It's a hot thing. And Elon immediately got involved. And we have the most incredible that they did in one day. They got tremendous communication. They went from literally no communication to tremendous. So I want to thank Elon Musk for what he's done in North Carolina. A little bit help in Georgia too. We had some areas that had a hard time with communication. He hooked it up to the satellites, which he feels very confident in doing. He likes satellites. He likes rocket ships, satellites, and there's nobody better. He's something. He's a piece of work, I'll tell you. But he had it done in about 15 seconds. He said, look, it goes right up to the satellite. It's already back down. And they had they had such great communication so rapidly. It's incredible, actually. And the situation in western North Carolina is very catastrophic, very bad. and they don't even realize the extent of it yet. A lot of people are missing, but we're going to be working with them, with North Carolina. Great people, great state, and we're working very hard with them to make sure that that it works out as well as it can. Amazingly, this is one of the biggest hurricanes anyone's ever seen. You know, it's late in the season, very unusual. I guess the water was 20 feet high, and nobody expects that. People go up to their house and they think they're safe on the second floor, and they weren't safe. This was one of the, they call it the waterfalls. This was one of the biggest they've ever seen, so it's too bad. Very late in the season, too. You almost don't even think of it as hurricane season. Our hearts break for every family that has lost a home, and they've lost so much. They've lost everything in many cases. A lot of people don't have insurance, and we have to come together as neighbors and friends and fellow citizens to support those in need, and there's a lot of those in need right now. Unfortunately, I look forward to being back in North Carolina and Georgia very soon, and also Tennessee and Alabama. We had some big damage, but North Carolina was really hit. So we're going to work with them very hard and hopefully help them. We're here today to talk about how we're going to rescue American families from the nightmare of the Harris-Biden administration and launch a new generation of golden age for America. You know what's going on with the schools in our country. Not a good situation. Since Kamala Harris cast the deciding votes on the bills that caused the worst inflation in American history by far, by the way. Higher prices, of course, the typical American family over $29,000, and you're continuing to pay $1,100 every single month, more than you were doing before. Nobody can afford that. Even if you get a salary increase, it's nothing compared to the kind of numbers you're talking about. Inflation is devastation. Inflation is country busting. It breaks countries. Look at Germany from centuries ago. Look at other countries, whether it's centuries ago or decades ago. Any country that goes through inflation, and we went through a really bad period. We're the worst in our history. 8.4 million Americans are now working second jobs, the highest in more than 38 years. And you now have to make $111,000 a year. That's a lot of money to afford an average home. A 46% increase since when I was president, so it's 46% higher. And that's not even including the cost of interest, because interest went from 2% to 11%. And you can't get the money at 11%, so it's not 11, it's a lot higher than that. With her colossal big government negotiations, Kamala Harris, who destroyed San Francisco and destroyed California. San Francisco is the best city in the country 18, 19 years ago. Bob Tisch, a friend of mine from Lowe's, many of you know Bob Tisch, he said it was the best city in the country. He was a businessman that had holdings all over. He said San Francisco was the best. He wouldn't believe it. He passed away a number of years ago, but he wouldn't believe what's happened to it. And he's also added an estimated $6,300 a year in regulatory costs onto the backs of every American family. So Kamala Harris has done this, and she's done it at a level like nobody's ever seen, with the help of Joe Biden. But I'm not sure Joe was involved, because I'm not sure he was involved in anything, to be honest with you. Now Kamala is coming back for more. So she ruins San Francisco. She ruins the state of California. And now she's coming back to destroy the United States of America, but we're not going to let it happen. As you know, she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor who nobody has spoken to. I'd love to talk to him. I would be interested in talking to him, actually. But we can't let this happen. We were way up on Biden, 21 points up on Biden after the debate. And they had a coup. They told him, you're not going to run. And he's not a happy man. He's pretending he's happy, but they took him out. He had 14 million votes. She had no votes. She was the first one that got broken in the primaries. She never made it to Iowa. She was the first one out, and now she's running. The whole thing doesn't make a lot of sense. You had many people that did much better. They had 22 people running, and she was the first one out. She went in, and she went out because people didn't like her. She wasn't good. and now she's the one that's representing the party, and the press gives her a free pass, and that's a little ridiculous, isn't it? Huh? But also never happened where we spent over $100 million on fighting Joe Biden, and then all of a sudden we're fighting somebody else. That's like a fight. The fighter's doing badly, and you say, okay, let's take him out and give somebody else a chance to win in the middle of the fight. So Kamala's plan is projected to raise the typical family's taxes by $2,600. And the tax queen, you know, they called her the tax queen in California because she liked taxes. I've never seen anyone win a race where they raise taxes all the time, but she liked taxes. This is definitely a unique election anyway. The tax queen also wants the largest small business tax hike in history and a 33% tax hike on American small businesses, which will send consumer prices skyrocketing. You think they're bad now? If Kamala gets 4 more years, she will crush family budgets with crippling energy costs thanks to her Green New Scam. The Green New Scam is one of the greatest, most difficult things to be watching. The real number they want is $93 trillion. They want buildings taken down and new buildings built without windows because it's more efficient. Let's do that. Let's just tell people you have a beautiful apartment, but you don't have any windows. It's one of the great scams. But, you know, the amazing thing is that nobody talks about it anymore. They're not talking about the Green New Deal anymore. They're not talking about environmental anymore. They're not talking about the oceans will rise by 1/16 of an inch over the next 400 years. They don't talk about it anymore. Something's happened. I don't know what it is. I think maybe it's not selling too well anymore. They call it now climate change because global warming wasn't working because the planet's actually gotten a little bit cooler recently. But climate change covers everything. It can rain, it can be dry, it can be hot, it can be cold. Climate change, everything is. Look, and I believe I really am an environmentalist. I've gotten environmental awards, but I want clean, beautiful air and clean, beautiful water. That's all, crystal clean water, and we want clean air. And, you know, during the last 2 years of my administration, we had the best on record, and we had a lot of drill, baby drill. We had a lot of drilling, but we had the best on record. My plan will cut energy prices in half. Within 12 months, we're going to have energy prices for businesses, but in my opinion, maybe even more importantly for the average household, I said by 12 months from January 20th, which is the day we go into office, I hope we have a country left because what's going on now is very dangerous. I've been talking about World War III. What's going on now between Russia, Ukraine, and the Middle East blowing up all over the place. It's a very dangerous time, most dangerous time since the end of World War II, without even question. But my plan will cut energy prices in half. I'm going to knock it out 50%, all. This is for families and businesses and everything. And with the artificial intelligence, as you know, and shocking, but you need more energy to make that competitive with China and some others, but primarily China. They're going wild now. They're building tremendous electric capacity, as you know. But you need more electricity. They have to create tremendous amounts of electricity in order to compete, and more than we have right now for the whole country. So you have to more than double up what we have right now to be competitive. And we'll be able to do that. I'll be able to do that. They won't be able to do it. You have to make sure your environmental impact statements get approved very quickly. Otherwise, you'll never be able to compete. They don't do environmental impact statements in China, to the best of my knowledge. They have one man say, yeah, you can build it, and that's the end of that. That was the environmental impact statement. We have to go through sometimes years of things, but all of that's going to be rapidly expedited. It's going to save you thousands of dollars on gasoline and home heating and air conditioning and electricity. We're going to be down for the entire energy package. You will be down by a minimum of 50% 1 year after January 20th. Nobody else will say that, but I can do that because we have more liquid gold under our feet than any other country. And I know how to use it. We had it going so well, and now we're buying oil from Venezuela and lots of other places that we shouldn't be buying. I call it Venezuelan tar. because essentially it's tar. You know, it's they have the places that they hone it and develop it is right in the middle of Houston, right in the middle of Houston. We have a refinery that only does that oil. It's the only one in the world that does that oil, because it's not oil, it's tar. And if you're an environmentalist and you like Texas, because I love Texas, we just got a poll from Texas. We're through the roof in Texas, which I love because I think it's an incredible place. But if you're an environmental person, the tar and all of the other things coming out of those chimneys and in that wonderful place, it's the only place in the entire world that does Venezuelan, I call it Venezuelan tar. But there's no reason for us to be doing it because we have more oil and gas. We have more, I say liquid gold, because I think it's the best expression. We have more liquid gold than Russia, Saudi Arabia, any other country in the world, and we don't even use it. And ours is pure. Perhaps worst of all, Kamala's mass migrant invasion will destroy our economy, importing tens of millions of, think of it, more illegal aliens than we've ever even thought about taking in. And for me to watch her the other night standing up at a television set saying, with a news conference saying how she's going to all of a sudden get involved at the border. Well, she was the border czar. She did a horrible job. She allowed 21 million plus people to come in, and many of them, and you've heard me say this many times, they came from prisons and jails. They came from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they came from terrorist camps where they trained them to come into the United States, and they come into the United States. Many, many terrorists. We have more terrorists come into the United States in the last 3 years than we have had in the last 30 years. And these are the real terrorists. These are the real ones. We have no idea who they are. They let them come in, just open borders, just the dumbest thing I've ever seen, other than if you're trying to sign them up to vote, which is what they're trying to do. Kamala grants them all amnesty, and she's promised that it will obliterate. She promised them that they're going into Medicare and Social Security. And if they're going to Medicare and Social Security, then she's going to kill Medicare and Social Security. And we're not going to let her do that. And I didn't let anything happen to either of them during my 4 years. We didn't raise the age for Social Security. They're going to end up raising it by 6 or 7 years if they get in. With 4 more years of Kamala, you'll have a 1929 style depression. That's sort of the ultimate depression. 1929 was the worst. You don't get worse than that. And it took 25 years to recover, frankly. People say, oh, we recovered with Roosevelt. No, it took 25 years to recover from it. And it was tremendous pain and suffering. And that's going to happen again. And I've been very good at predicting things. The hat says Trump was right about everything. And it wasn't even my hat. I didn't even do it, but somebody made a lot of money. Trump was right about everything. But when I win, the next Trump economic boom begins the moment the polls close in Wisconsin on November 5th. And again, Brian and Tommy and all of the people that have been so great here, we're seeing numbers that a lot of people have never seen, real numbers that a lot of people haven't seen, especially as Republicans. They haven't seen because they want to have our country back. They don't want to have millions of people pouring in that are criminals, that are murderers. Think of it. We had 13, and these are numbers that were never announced because they never wanted to do that. They never really talked about these numbers. They've never done it in many years, but they did here. And I think somebody at, whether it's Border Patrol or Justice, but somebody said it has to be done. It was announced just before she went to the microphone to say that she was going to do a good job at the border. And a lot of people were saying, well, why hasn't she done it in 4 years? Why are you doing a good job now? She's done a horrible job, even where they tried to give it a little bit of a kick 2 months ago, 3 months ago, so they could look a little bit better for the election. They didn't say that they're flying thousands of people over, and those numbers aren't included, or the app, where they have an app that's being used by the cartel leaders, the people that are making billions of dollars. The cartel leaders, think of this, call the app, and they say where to drop the illegal migrants. This is done under their administration. It's nobody's ever seen anything like it. But they said they closed the border, but they didn't say that airplanes are flying over with hundreds of thousands of migrants, dropping them all over the place. And I'll tell you what, the people in these towns are scared. They're scared. Even if they haven't arrived there yet, they're scared. When you take a look at what's happening in Ohio, Springfield, where you have a town of 50,000 people, that's beautiful. It's safe, a great place, idyllic, actually. And now they've, in a short period of time, dropped 32,000 people there. And some of those people are pretty tough people. And the mayor of the town, I don't know him, but he seems like a nice man, but he doesn't want to talk anything. He doesn't want to say anything bad. He wants to be politically correct. And all he says is we're trying to get interpreters because none of the people, virtually none of them speak English. So he's looking for interpreters when he should be looking for people to take them home because this country cannot sustain what's happening to it. We can't sustain hundreds of thousands of people coming in a month or, more importantly, in a short period of time, 21 million plus. We have no idea what it is. You have gotaways. Nobody has any idea, if you include the gotaways, what the number. We can't even really say, you know, with other countries like China, you say it's 1.4 billion. With India, you say it's 1.5 billion. They're big. With us, you don't really know what the number is. You say, how many do we have? Is it 320? Is it 325? Is it 350? Nobody knows. If you go to government agencies, say how many people are in our country, they have no idea. Well, we're going to have an idea very soon. Under my leadership, real median household income rose by $7,684. And that's before the pandemic. And even after the pandemic, the annual income was up $6,400. We did a great job in the pandemic, never got the credit we deserved, but we did an amazing job. Operation Warp Speed is being studied by many, many schools, both militarily and business-wise. Operation Warp Speed, even my greatest enemies, they say, what a job that was. That was a job like nobody else has ever done. And it's ripped the world apart. Every country got ripped apart, including China. China was delayed, but it was hit harder proportionally probably than almost any country. It was a terrible time. Probably $60 trillion in damage, and caused by the Wuhan lab. I said that from the beginning. It came out of Wuhan. And the Wuhan lab, it wasn't from bats in a cave that was 2,000 miles away. It wasn't from Italy. It wasn't from France. They blamed everybody. It's really the China virus. But we did a great job with the ventilators, with the masks and the gowns and everything. You know, when we got here, our cupboards, I used to say our cupboards were bare. We had nothing. No president put anything in for a pandemic, and I don't blame him. Who would have thought? I thought it was sort of an ancient thing. It wouldn't happen now, so it wasn't, you know, something that I ever mentioned very much. I didn't blame other presidents, but they didn't put anything into it. So we had the cupboards were bare, and all of a sudden we heard there's something coming from China, and terrible. We had the greatest economy in the history of our country. We gave you the biggest tax cuts in the history of our country and the biggest regulation cuts by far in the biggest, all by far in the history of our country, and rebuilt our military. But a lot of that, not relatively speaking maybe, but a big chunk went to Afghanistan, where they're one of the biggest sellers of military equipment now in the world. And what I say is the most embarrassing moment in the history of the United States, that we took the soldiers out first. You're supposed to take the soldiers out last. A child would know that. I brought a child up to the dais once, and I gave him the facts in front of a very big crowd of maybe 10,000 people, maybe more. I gave him the facts. I said, so would you take the military out first or last? He said, I take the military out last, sir. He was 5 years old. I said, how old are you? He said, 5. A lot of you saw that. As president, I will deliver gigantic tax cuts for working families, and we will have no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, and no tax on Social Security benefits for our seniors. And that's a very big thing, but especially the last one for our seniors, because they've been decimated. Young people have too, but they've been decimated, seniors, on their fixed incomes. But nobody's ever been hurt more. Nobody has been hurt more. than seniors with respect to inflation. Inflation has just absolutely destroyed seniors. So I'm giving them no tax on Social Security benefits, and that'll make up for some of it. This was all created by Biden and Harris, although nobody knows, when I say Harris, nobody knows who I'm talking about. So Kamala. And while working Americans catch up, we're going to put a temporary cap on credit card interest rates of 10% because those rates are going up to 22, 24, 26%. And it's not sustainable. It's not fair. So it'll be temporary, but we have to help people. They can't pay those rates. We're going to unleash American energy, drive the prices way down. We're going to stop the people from pouring into our border. We're going to have a mass deportation of criminals. We have to get the criminals out of our country. They're not going to help us. Again, you had 13,000, more than 13,000, to be exact, 13,099. And these are murderers. These are murderers that have murdered in many cases, about 30% of the cases, more than one person. And in some cases, more than 5 people. These are real murderers. These make our bad people look like innocent people. I know a lot of the talk from the radical left people is, well, these immigrants don't commit crime. No, these people are among the worst in the world. They come from the Congo in Africa. Many people from the Congo. I don't know what that is, but they come out of jails in the Congo. You know, they're letting their jail population come into the United States. Their jails are being emptied into the United States. Their gang members are being taken out of Caracas, Venezuela, and lots of other places, which was a rough city, very dangerous city. And they're being delivered into the United States, their gang members. And these are tough gang members. You see what's happening in Aurora, in Colorado. The mayor is petrified. He doesn't, I mean, he's petrified, but the governor is a mess. He doesn't know what the hell. He's a Democrat liberal. And they're taking over real estate, lots of real estate. The governor doesn't know what to do. And, you know, they want to be politically correct. They don't want to say anything. They're so afraid of saying anything and offending anybody. They have to go in. They have to get them out. But when you look at what's happened in Aurora in Colorado, it's incredible. And Springfield is unbelievable. Again, a beautiful community. And now, almost immediately, 32,000 more people. And these are people that have had a rough life, too. They're tough. Some of them are real tough. But they've had a rough life. It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. People in Springfield are moving out. They have to move out. They're not going to be able to live there. I'm going to appoint Elon Musk, who's a fantastic guy, to lead a government efficiency commission tasked with saving trillions of dollars in fraud, waste, and abuse, and driving down inflation and driving down costs. We have tremendous fat. I mean, just one example. When I came in, I was asked by Boeing to sign a contract for the purchase of a new Air Force One, and which is actually 2 planes. A lot of people don't know it. In a way, it's 4 planes because it's sort of Air Force One becomes the plane that the president uses. And I was asked to do it, and I was able to cut $1.6 billion off the deal without any changes, except I was giving it a better-looking paint job. And we ordered new ones, because we have Air Force One is 32 years old, 2 planes, 32 years old. And you'd come and you'd land it next to some of these planes from Saudi Arabia and a lot of other places, United Arab Emirates is a beauty. But you'd land the plane, and the plane looked awfully shabby. It was time. 32 years old, so I got new ones. But I came in, and they asked me to sign a $5.6 or $5.7 billion contract. Now, they're very special planes, because it's like, people hear billions for airplanes, but they're very special. I can't even say you why, but I can't tell you that. I'm not supposed to. But they are very expensive but incredible planes from Boeing. And I said, I'm not going to sign it. It's too much. And Boeing came back, and they cut $400 million off just by my saying that. And I said, nope, it's too high. It has to have a 3 in the front of it. It has to have a 3.
Thank you for tuning into the live show. Okay, so I just wanted to let y'all know, did you hear about the $567 million in defense support that Biden is sending to Taiwan? This was according to New York New York Post. Okay, this is according to New York Post. But I'm thinking in my mind, like, we just got over Hurricane Helen. Inflation is high. People are trying to get money to pay rent, buy food. Why? What are you doing? Send aid to Americans first. Why would you do that? And yet you're sending $567 million in defense support to Taiwan. And you just sent another money to Ukraine a couple of weeks ago. What is going on, man? Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, man.
3, because this was a 5, right? 5.6, 5.7 billion. I said, nope, it's too high. And they called back a week later and they took another $250 million off. So I got $650 million with like about 2 minutes of conversation. I said, no, I'm not doing it. It has to have a 3. And this went on for about a month. And I sort of forgot about it. I said, look, forget it. Well, let's not do it. And lo and behold, about 4 months later, I get a call from Dennis. This was prior to the horrible accidents, the 2 accidents that really hurt Boeing. I mean, it was the greatest company in the world. I think it was thought of as the greatest company in the world, and now it's not considered that. They went down a long way, but this was when it was prime time, Boeing prime time at the beginning of my term. And they said, here's the story, sir. We thought we had a deal at $5.7 billion. We'll do it for $3,999,999,999.99. 1 penny less than 4. I said, you got a deal. So I saved about $1.6 billion. Same exact plane, nothing different. It's not like, oh, gee, we have cheaper engines, or we have no generation system, or the wings are smaller, or lots of things that you can do to cheapen it up. No, the exact same plane, except we had a much better paint job. And we saved $1.6 billion, and it took me like 3 months. And actually the last part was the most effective because I gave up on him, and he called up out of the blue. In fact, when he called, I said, the head of Boeing, what the hell does he want? That's always the best way to negotiate when it doesn't matter to you so much, right? I said, what does he want? And then he said, you know the plane that we've been talking about a few months ago? Yeah, tell me about it. That's when he made the best offer. So we saved $1.6 billion or $1.7 billion for that. I said, so you're going to make $1.7 billion to build an airplane? That was the way I looked at it. I knew we have so much. Elon Musk is a master of that, and he's so into it because he loves the country so much. He endorsed me with the warmest endorsement. He thinks it's very.
Here is another one. Did you guys also know that the U.S. dock workers strike now is halting half of the nation's ocean shipping, according to Reuters? This is according to Reuters News. Now, according to CNN, it says port workers' strike begins across the East and Gulf Coast. According to Los Angeles Times, dock workers' strike shuts down ports in the East, threatening big hits to the U.S. economy. That should be the president's priority, not somebody else, not other countries. That should be the commander in chief's priorities.
Important that I win because we're going to save our country. If these people win, we're not going to have a country. But we're going to have Elon do it, and he'll be able to save, I think, trillions of dollars. I really do. I think trillions of dollars. And nobody in the country will feel a thing except we'll save our country. And we'll then start paying down debt. But we have deficits. I think we're going to have a $2 trillion deficit with Biden this year, or Kamala. $2 trillion, it's not sustainable. You can't do that. And China's gotten totally out of control. As the deficit with China is incredible. The deficit with the European Union is massive, like $320 billion. And, we have a new one now, Mexico, because Mexico's starting to get a little rambunctious with the car business. And for those people in United Auto Workers, the head of the union is incompetent. The deal he made in allowing the United States to go to all electric is insane, because people don't want to buy all electric. I think electric cars are great, but, it's a market, a little percentage, probably 10%, I don't know, some percentage. I think they're great, but they don't go far. They're made in China, and they're very expensive. And not everybody can have them. They want everybody to have an electric car. It won't work. And we don't have enough electricity right now to take care of our homes and our buildings. In California, Gavin Newsom has a situation that's unbelievable. He's having blackouts and brownouts every week. And now we're supposed to, on top of it, feed cars all of this electricity, so it doesn't make so. I'll be terminating that on day one. And again, we're all for electric cars. I think it's great. I think Elon makes great cars. And somebody said, did he ever speak to you about it? Because the way I've been saying this for 2 years. It's a tribute to him. He never mentioned it to me once. It's pretty amazing. He didn't say, well, listen, you got to lay off, because I'm a big fan of electric cars, but not for everyone. You have to have gasoline-powered cars, and hybrids are great. And some new ones are coming on the market. We have hydrogen. Hydrogen is a hot one right now, but it is a little problem. It tends to blow up on occasion. And if it does blow up, you are unrecognizable. They will never be able to see who you were. Maybe a blood sample, but it's a bad blow up. I would say that's a serious problem, so I don't expect to be buying a hydrogen car for myself. But a lot of great things are in the marketplace, because we're here in Wisconsin with the great Governor Thompson. He's a great man. He's a great politician, one of the most popular, I think the most popular politician in the history of the state. And it's an honor that he even does this. I mean, he just feels he's a little like Elon in that sense. He feels it's so important. But one of the founding fathers of school choice, I didn't even know that until a couple of days ago. But he's a big school choice. A lot of people are. I got lots of calls. I even got a call from Rupert Murdoch, who I have a lot of respect for. And he said, school choice. You have to go with school choice. That was just today. I said, I didn't know he was so into school choice, but he feels very strongly about it. He's a good man, too. I also want to talk about another way that we can help the American family, supporting school choice for every child. And, you have to do the school choice thing, because right now we are just about at the bottom of every list, and yet we're number one on every list of cost per pupil. Cost per student, we're number one. And if you look at a list of the top 40 nations, we are at the bottom of the list. We're number 40, number 39 all the time, and often led by Norway and Denmark and Sweden, and China is in the top 5 usually. Pretty amazing, with 1.4 billion people, pretty amazing. But China's in the top 5, and we're number 40, number 39. And one of the things we'll be doing is moving education back into the states. And, if you think about it, like a state like this, I think would do fantastically well with education. I think that a state like Iowa and Idaho and Indiana, I think you'd end up, I was looking at them the other night, just from common sense, with a party of common sense. Then I said, more than anything else now, with a party of common sense, because that's more important than anything else. We don't want men and women's sports. We want to have strong borders, and we want to have fair elections, not rigged elections. And we have a lot of problems in this country. But if you take a look at all of it, everything that we're doing, every single thing that we're doing is based on structure and common sense. I was looking at the various states, and I think 35 states could be the equivalent of Norway and Denmark. If you think about it, they'd run great. I mean, I think Iowa would do great. I think Idaho would do great. I mean, these are states that have no debt. They have low taxes. They've done great. And then you have the same, you have a guy like Gavin wouldn't do very well, I don't think, with it. He signed a thing yesterday. Somebody told me, I haven't, it's not confirmed, but he signed a document yesterday that said you're not allowed to ask a voter for ID, identification, and if you do, it's like a crime. Why would anybody do that? In other words, this was signed yesterday or the day before by Gavin Newsom, a failed governor, and it said, if you ask anybody whether or not anything having to do with their identification, now for everything else you're allowed to have a card, but for voting, which is our most important act, it's considered virtually a crime, so you're not allowed to ask for identification. Now there's only one reason that's done, that's because they want to cheat on elections. When you have something like that where there will be no asking, it's not a question of having voter ID, it's a question you're not even allowed to ask. And if you ask, it's a crime. That's only because of the fact that they want to cheat on elections. And we can be nice and we can be politically incorrect, but the only thing they're going to do there is cheat on elections. And we just can't let this happen. The city of Milwaukee is the home of first and oldest choice program. You have the school choice program in Milwaukee is the oldest in the whole nation. In Milwaukee, which has been run by Democrats for over half a century, it's incredible. Families are faced with one of the worst public school systems in the entire country, considered pretty much the worst, but there are some others that are right there with you, I guarantee you that. Only 16% of Milwaukee public school students are reading at grade level, and only 10% can do math at grade level. So you're talking about 16% and 10% can basically read or do math. School choice gives Milwaukee children a lifeline to a better education. 8th grade students in Milwaukee and in Milwaukee schools and choice programs are more than twice as likely to be proficient or advanced in math. And that's good, but when you say we're going to double up from 16% or double up from 10%, it's not really great, is it? And outsourced, we're going to outsource and outscore other public school districts. So they want to start off by competing against certain public school districts, and I guess that's a good place to start. But it's they got to straighten out the schools in this country. Schools are really bad. And I think we're going to be able to do that. I think we're going to be able to do a lot of it. But if they're run by the state and run by the parents, because in Washington, half of the buildings, such a large number, every building you pass in Washington says Department of Education. You're going to have a lot of it, vacant space. Now we can have somebody else maybe move in. But these schools, it's massive. It's massive. I figure we'll have one person plus a secretary. You'll have a secretary to a secretary. We'll have one person plus a secretary, and all the person has to do is, are you teaching English? Are you teaching arithmetic? What are you doing? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. And are you not teaching woke? Not teaching woke is a very big factor. But we'll have a very small staff. We can occupy that staff right in this room, actually. I think this room is too large. And all they're going to do is they're going to see that the basics are taken care of. We don't want to have somebody get crazy and start teaching a language that we don't want them to teach. But we'll do something with education. I think when we move it into the local districts. But the big thing is we're going to take it all out of Washington. We're going to send it all back to the states. We're going to spend less than half. And we're going to have much better education. But in many states, you will be the equivalent. I mean, you have states that are incredible. And in many states, you'll be the equivalent of a top 3, top 4 school, like in Norway or a Sweden is very strongly thought of, too. Although lately they've had some problems, all about that. If you want a better education for your child, Kamala Harris stands in your way. Kamala and the radical left Democrat Party want to keep Black and Hispanic children trapped in family government. I mean, I think that's really the reason. It's all Democrat we're talking about. Of the top 25 dangerous cities, virtually every single one of them is a Democrat-run city. So I think there'll be a lot of changes made. I really do. I just can't believe people can continue to go for this. But by contrast, I believe that school choice is the civil rights issue of our time. A child's fate should be determined by it has to be determined by their love of education, by their parents, by so many factors, but it can't be determined by a zip code, and no parent should be forced to send their child to a failing government-run school. I mean, in all fairness, they get into these schools, they're so bad. You don't give them a chance. We spend more money on education than any other country in the world. And I said before, much more money per pupil. We're number one on every list. And yet our public schools get worse, and the results get worse, and it goes just so horrible to see it. I mean, think of it. They graduate from public school, and they can't read. They can't write. This is people that actually literally graduate, can barely read or write. Wisconsin private schools receive nearly $3,000 less per student per year through the school choice programs than public schools, yet they achieve far better outcomes. A great job they've done, actually. Even as they fail to educate our youth, our opponents are using government schools to indoctrinate children, pushing radical transgender ideology on children, and changing the child's gender without even parental consent. Can you imagine that? Your child leaves for school and comes home and their gender has been changed. I don't want to get into the details, but it's not even believable. Without parental consent. All of that's changing. It's changing immediately. One of the things I wanted to mention with all of the people coming in, they're taking black and Hispanic jobs. The black population, their unemployment is way up over the last few months, and the fake news isn't reporting it. And the reason they're way up is the illegal migrants are taking the black population's jobs and the Hispanic population's jobs. And that's not fair. That's not a good thing. But that's what's happening. They come in, and many of these people, again, and many of them aren't. Many of them are criminals. Many of them are people that have murdered people we just don't know about. We know nothing about these people because they came in, they didn't have to report, they didn't have to give a piece of paper. I had Remain in Mexico, very strong. The president of Mexico approved it. I said, look, you're going to have to approve it. He said, I won't approve that. Why would I approve that? Why, am I stupid? I said, no, you're not stupid. You're very smart. That's our problem. You're too smart. He said, but you're going to approve it. And he said, why would I do that? I said, because if you don't, I'm going to put 100% tariffs on your cars coming in, and we're going to make a fortune. He said, like you said, I will approve it. Took me about 2 minutes. But that is one more reason why I'll fight for the right of every parent to send their child to a public, private, charter, or religious school of their choice. We have to be able to have school choice. School choice is very important. And the Democrats are very much opposed to it, as you know. And I have great faith in teachers. You know, I don't care if they're union or non-union. I have great respect for teachers. I've had some teachers that were so good, had a lot to do with my life. Now, some people would say they did a really bad job with him, and that's possible. That's possible. But no, they had a lot to do with me. I will tell you, I have great respect for teachers at a level that few people would understand. We want federal education dollars to follow the student rather than propping up a bloated and radical bureaucracy in Washington, D.C., which is what we're doing now ultimately. We want to close the Federal Department of Education, and we're going to do that, and we're going to move it all back into our states. And as I said, some states are going to be unbelievable, and some states are not going to do a good job. The ones that aren't going to do a good job are the ones that aren't doing a good job now and everything else. We're joined today by two beneficiaries of school choice here in Wisconsin, sisters, Michaela and Leah Lawrence. Where may you, look at you. Look. Both attended St. Marcus Lutheran School, a high-performing K-8 private school. And it's a choice school in the inner city, Milwaukee. And I love Milwaukee. We had such a great convention here. They treated us so well. I also like the result. If I didn't get the right result, I probably wouldn't like Milwaukee. I got a great result, but it was beautiful. The building was beautiful. We're going to come here. I believe my people are working. We're going to come here in the same arena. The arena was great. And we're also going to go to Green Bay. We're going to be announcing it pretty soon. Green Bay for a big one. We're going to have two big ones, very big ones, maybe a third. of a little bit more of this nature. But we're going to do your basketball arena. We're all sort of set, and we're going to do Green Bay. We'll do it the day before the game as opposed to the day of the game. But Michaela graduated with honors from high school in May and is going to school for dental hygiene. And Leah is now a senior in high school, a wrestler, wow, at Wisconsin Lutheran, who went to the state finals twice, wow, and is currently scouting engineering schools across the country. She's looking at a really great engineering school. So Leah and Michaela, if you could come up, I'd love you to say a few words, please. Thank you. Who's the wrestler here? I'm not going to mess with her. That's good, please.
All right. Well, my name is Michaela Lawrence, as you already know. Just first want to come up here and thank everyone for the opportunity for me speaking. On behalf of my family, I thank my dad specifically for putting me and my sister in choice schools and having the opportunity to learn. Personally, going to the high school I went to, Luther Preparatory, really learned about Christ-like behavior and how to show that in the outside world. And a person like me going to college now, you get to the outside world and it's like, wow, a lot of these people really need Jesus. But I'm thankful for that opportunity. I'm thankful for President Donald Trump, too, someone who supports that opportunity that I got from grade school to high school, learning about Christ and having the choice to really have an opportunity to get a good education and have a close relationship with all my friends and teachers. So thank you.
That's so beautiful. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. And my name is Leah. I'm the wrestler, by the way. And I'm so grateful again for getting the opportunity to come out here and speak on behalf of School Choice. This is an amazing program. I'm so thankful that Mr. President Trump, he is helping out with this program. He's doing so much for education, and education in Milwaukee especially is in dire need, especially right now. So I do want to personally thank Mr. Trump for helping us with this. Thank you.
What's your record in wrestling? That's pretty good. She's got a good record. You said, what's your record in wrestling? Thank you both. Beautiful job. Thank you, Don. How nice is that, huh? Very proud of you both. It's amazing. So thank you. And also with us is Tukara Bell, a mom of 3 whose family has been uplifted by School Choice. And so, Tukara, could you come up and say a few words, please? Come on up. It's very exciting.
Thank you all for this opportunity. I really appreciate it. I am a mom of 3. We benefit from the School Choice program. This is my daughter, Cynthia Dunlap. And School Choice, it gives us an opportunity to send my children to a school that aligns with my morals and my values, and while also giving my children a personalized educational experience. I greatly appreciate it, and they would not have these opportunities if it was not for student choice. Cindy, would you like to say something?
Hi, I'm Cynthia. School Choice has given me so many opportunities that any other school could ever give me. I'm so thankful for School Choice, and I also have a gift for you, President.
Wow.
On behalf of Trinity
Thank you very
Lutheran
much.
of Christ Baptist.
I'm going to wear it tonight.
Nice.
Thank you, darling. Very much. Thank you. That's really nice. Come on, you hold that. For me. Don't take it from me. I want to keep. So again, universal school choice, very important. We're backing it all the way, 100%. And I want to thank everybody for being here. And there's a lot of media here, so if you'd like to ask a couple of questions, I think we'll do that. So go ahead, please. Brian? Yes, thank you.
Under your administration, you brought world peace. You didn't have any chaos in the world.
No.
I wanted to get your comments on what's
Brian, I think it's the most dangerous time we've had, certainly since the end of the Second World War. I think it could end up being a world war. You have two hot spots, and you'll probably have a third, maybe with Taiwan. But you have Ukraine and Russia, and that's out of control. I met with President Zelensky, and I got along very well with President Putin. I think I can get it solved, but we should get on it immediately. You have to. I think I would like to be able to solve it while president-elect. If I get elected, I'm going to work on that immediately. It's going to be my first 2 phone calls. And my second is going to be, we're going to close the border immediately and have people come into our country, but legally. And my third will be drill, baby, drill. You know, it's like not too complicated. But that series of calls, I think is going to be very important. That war, millions of people are being killed. I don't think people recognize how many people are being killed. I don't think it's being properly reported. It's a horrible, horrible war. And then you see what's happening even today. You know, where is that going to stop? And, you know, you have to give Israel a lot of credit for being able to protect itself. You look at these forces, they shot down almost 200 rockets today. But this is not the way anybody should have to live. So we're going to obviously be very involved in the Middle East. This would have never happened. We did the Abraham Accords. I think everybody, including Iran, would have been in the Abraham Accords had I taken over as president. I think even Iran would have been in the Abraham Accords ultimately. It would have been great for everybody, and you would have had peace in the Middle.
Thank you to everybody watching the live show. God bless you. Tune into the live show. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. My thing is, you might not like the way he talks. Oh, I don't like the way Trump talks because this, that. I get it. However, the record speaks for itself. You did not have to think about Ukraine and Russia. You did not have to think about Israel and the Palestinian people. You didn't have to think about all of these things going on. What was the mortgage rate in 2018, 2019, 2020? Now, what is the current mortgage rate? You may not like Trump, I get it. However, what is the record, the performance, bro? Stop voting based on emotions. I don't like the way he talks. He goes on Twitter. Nobody cares, bro. Results.
Middle East. We got 4 countries solved, and very respected countries, as you know. They were signed up. And then when Biden took over, they haven't signed one country. I would have had every country in the Middle East would have been signed up. The only question would be Iran, and I think they would have, you know, for certain reasons, I think they probably would have been there too. There would have been peace in the Middle East. Instead, this is just tearing it apart. This has really been bad. But they have to finish that process. However it turns out, they have to finish the process. This is a little bit like 2 kids fighting in the schoolyard. Sometimes you have to just sort of let it go a little bit, and we'll see what happens. But it's really caused by a lack of respect for the United States of America. This would have never happened. Israel would have never happened. October 7th never would have happened. Russia never would have invaded Ukraine. And for 4 years they didn't. They would have never invaded. We wouldn't have had inflation. We wouldn't have had, not the withdrawal, because we were withdrawn. We're the ones that got it ready to withdraw. But we wouldn't have had that horrible, most embarrassing day in the history of our country. And a lot of other good things would have happened. And right now we have a world in chaos. I always quote Viktor Orban because he's a very respected, tough guy. They say he's a tough guy. Well, I guess they're all sort of tough guys. But Viktor Orban said, if Trump comes back, you won't have any wars. You won't have any wars. And he's about as tough as they get. And he said it loud and clear. And he said why. But you won't have any wars. So I just want to see, look, there's no huge benefit. I think Europe has to pay up more because it's very unequal, and they have to pay up more for that, and they have to do it now because we have an ocean in between. It's much more important to Europe than it is to us, but we want to see that war taken care of, and we certainly want to see peace in the Middle East as soon as it's possible. All right? Thank you very much. Yeah. Please.
You met with President Zelensky last week. Should President Zelensky be prepared to give up some of Ukraine territory in order to end the war? And the second part here is, if you were president right now, after Iran launched its more than 200 missiles towards Israel, last week you had suggested that if Iran tried to attack you, that you would blow the country to smithereens. How would you handle Iran right now?
Well,
would
I
you
wouldn't
use
be
U.S.
around if they
force?
did that,
Would
yeah.
you use U.S. force?
Yeah. No, I wouldn't be around if they did that, but let's assume I'm not around. The President of the United States should blow that country to smithereens, because you can't do that. And the President should make a statement to that effect. But as you know, I mean, you're in danger right now. You are in danger now because of
Leanne, shout out to
them
Leanne.
and
I
their
see you, Leanne.
challenge
Thank you
to
for
me.
tuning in.
And the reason they did that is because I had them in a position where they would have made a deal. They had no money. There was no terrorism. There was no money for Hamas. There was no money for Hezbollah. You know that. I mean, that was reported when I was leaving. They said there was absolutely no terrorism. In 4 years, we had no terrorism. And a large part of that was Iran had no money. And I wasn't looking to hurt them. I was looking to, I want them to be wonderful and great and happy. But we didn't want them to have a nuclear weapon. They can't have a nuclear
Would
weapon.
you use U.S. force today?
Well, I don't want to say what I'd use, because I don't want to give up negotiating abilities, because so I don't want to say exactly, but they understand where I stand, and we have to get back to being at least a partially civilized world. What's going on today? They sent 200 missiles over to Israel, and now people would say, well, now it's Israel's turn, right? That's what happens. It goes back and forth. It could happen for a long time. Should have never happened. It would never have happened. And again, Iran was not in a position to sponsor terror because they didn't have any money. I mean, now they have $300 billion. Biden took off all the sanctions. I had sanctions. I told China, if you buy oil from Iran, that was their biggest customer, you're not going to do any business in the United States, and we're going to put tariffs all over your products. And they said, well, we're going to pass. And they didn't buy. And I said the same thing to other countries, and they didn't buy. And time went by, and all of a sudden they had no money. And they would have made a deal, and I would have made a good deal for them. I'm not looking to hurt them. I want them to be great. Let them be happy and good. But they can't have a nuclear weapon. And now they're very close to having one. And it's very dangerous to the world. Very dangerous to the world. I mean, the biggest problem today, in my opinion, the biggest risk is the nuclear weapons, the weaponry. It's so powerful today. And I know because I rebuilt the United States military. During my term, I rebuilt it. We had fighter jets that were 50 years old. And we have all F-35s, and we have great planes now. We have largely new. We gave a lot of it to Afghanistan, stupidly. New goggles. They had the newest goggles. They had the best goggles. They never fought at night because they couldn't see, but now they can fight at night. They have the goggles. They have the trucks that are armor plated. Think of the 70,000 trucks. 70,000. Go to the biggest used car lot in America, and they probably don't have more than 400 or 500 cars available at any one time. We have 70,000 trucks, many of them millions of dollars each, armor plated with the finest 4, 5, 6-inch armor on these trucks. And we gave it to them. And they sell the equipment. And they're one of the largest sellers of military equipment. They're selling the equipment that we gave them. Who would do that? Who would be so stupid to do that? Who would move the military out first? Because, you know, they have American hostages. Most importantly, we lost 13 great soldiers. And of tremendous importance, we have many soldiers that lost their arms and their legs and were just obliterated because of stupid people. We should have left from Bagram, not that base. We had it all mapped out. And we had options. We had a lot of things they had to do, everything they had to do. And they weren't doing it. And we said, good, the deal's dead. And then they did it. We would have had that. It was perfect. It was a beautiful thing. It was going to go well. And they respected me. They respected me. Remember, we didn't have one soldier killed in 18 months in Afghanistan. The Taliban, that's their fighter. And I spoke to Abdul, the head of the Taliban, a couple of times. But I explained to him, you can't do that. You can't do that, Abdul. And from the time I spoke to him, we didn't have not one fighter killed, not one American soldier killed or even shot at for 18 months. And then I left, and we had these clowns take over, and it all blew up. It was not going to blow up. It was going to be good. One of the worst things they did is give up one of the largest air bases in the world, the largest runways, most powerful runways, very deep with concrete. You could land anything on them, meaning the weight. You could land any plane on them. Very, very long, I think 18,000 feet. And to give that up, and the importance of it wasn't Afghanistan. The importance of Bagram, and very important, was it was 1 hour away from China where they make their nuclear weapons, right in that area. But 1 hour away from China. Forget about Afghanistan. We should have never been there. But we were 1 hour away from where China makes their nuclear weapons. And now you know who occupies it? China. How about that? They left. So I was never going to, I was moving out. We were all set to move. I'm the one that got the soldiers down to that level. We had no problem. And we were going to move out. Soldiers would have moved out less. We would have taken the equipment. We would have done everything. I had no confidence in the Army, meaning in their Army, the people that they were giving us, because they were loyal to the other side. I always knew that. That's why you had so many blue on brown and brown on blue. You had so many attacks where we trained them, and then we hand them a gun, and they turn the gun around. They shoot the sergeants and everybody else there, the Americans. I said, well, there's something. We never had so many attacks like that. We trained them, and as soon as they get a gun that's loaded, they turn it and they shoot everybody. And I said, what the hell's going on over here? And they're tough fighters too, but they weren't. The reason they were even in there is because they were the highest paid soldiers in the world. When Mattis would say, sir, they're fighting for their country, well, they weren't really fighting for their country, because otherwise you wouldn't have had so many, I call them turnarounds, where they turn around and shoot you. They weren't fighting. They was fighting because they were getting so much money as a soldier. It's a job where they were making a lot of money, but their loyalty wasn't to that group. And the head guy was a total thief. I knew that. I didn't get along with him at all. He left with bags of money in a helicopter, and there were bags of money at the end of the runway. How stupid can Americans be? The world doesn't respect us because we've made so many stupid moves. I mean, this guy left with bags of money, and I said he was no good for years. I said he was no good. I met with him a couple of times, fine, but that whole thing was collapsing. But they weren't loyal to us. They were loyal to themselves. Good fighters, great fighters, I will tell you. Among the best. They were actually they could take a knife. They were like Rambos. It's like putting 1,000,000 Rambos. Good old Sylvester Stallone is my friend. But it's like putting 1,000,000 Rambos. Somebody explained that to me. They're great fighters. It's like putting a Rambo. Give him a knife, and that's all he needs. And by the time he finishes, he'll go down and he slits the throats. Look at what happened with Russia with them. Look at what happened. So many different wars. They fight tough, but now they have great equipment. And then the other day, it sickens you to see it. They have through their boulevard. They have this boulevard, and they're running our equipment through the boulevard. You know, the defeated Americans. We should have left from Bagram, because Bagram is a massive base with hundreds of miles of surrounding area with nothing there and fencing, and you would have had nobody killed. Instead, a lot of people got killed. We had the 13, but you had hundreds of people who were killed. Civilians were killed at the same time. So it's a shame. Again, common sense. We have to use common sense. They should have never left. That's like an inner city airport, and it was packed. You couldn't even move, and then a bomb went off and just was so destructive. And so sad, because I got to know the parents of the 13 soldiers, most of them, and they're incredible people. They were treated very unfairly. Biden never called them. Kamala never called them. And then on top of it all, in the debate, she said, we have no soldiers fighting at all. We have no soldiers. We have soldiers fighting. They were very inside. She had no idea. She has no idea what she's doing. And it's very sad. Okay.
On Ukraine, did you urge Zelensky to be prepared to cede some of Ukraine territory?
I didn't say anything because I think it's too soon. I listened. But I think a deal is there to be had. Absolutely. That's what I do. What I do is I make deals.
Do you think that that's what a deal will have
I think that
include?
he will make a deal. And I think, look, it would have been a lot better before, because the cities now are all blown up. I mean, they're all blown up except for Kiev. You have the cities are those beautiful golden towers. They're ancient gold. They're all laying on their sides, smashed to smithereens, right? The cities many of them are just gone.
Do you think they can still
It would have been
work?
so great. Would have been so great. Number one, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had to make a deal. Putin never would have gone. I talked to him. It was the apple of his eye. I talked to him a lot about Ukraine. I mean, it was the apple of his eye. You know, he said this used to be a part of the Soviet Union. It used to be a part of Russia. But he had a whole history going. It was something he would have never done it. He would have never done it with me there. I mean, I can't speak for the future. Probably would have done it eventually. He would have done it because he wanted it. But this was something that was very important to him. But he would have never done it. And honestly, he never did do it, and there was never even a threat of him doing it. But I'll get something done. I know both of them. I know both of them very well.
Mr. President, you talked about early voting in Dane County today.
I talked about what?
Early voting in Dane
Yeah.
County today. Nearly 500,000 Wisconsin voters have received their ballots already. Now they're returning them in the mail, ballot drop boxes. For you to win, I'm curious what you tell voters who are skeptical of that process after they've heard you talk about things like fraud or one-day voting.
Well, I think people are going to watch the process a lot closer. Last time we had COVID, people couldn't even get out. You had no security in rooms. People were afraid to go. Even security people, you couldn't get security. It was a terrible thing that happened last time. If that didn't happen, we'd have a much different country today. You'd have a much different world today. But last time we had COVID, and to be honest, I mean, you take a look at the security. The security was non-existent. No security guard wanted to go out because they didn't want to catch COVID. Big, strong guy, and we say, "Oh, you'll be great." And then he says, "I'm not going out. I don't want to die." And it was a very sad thing. They did a lot of bad things, including not getting legislative approval for some of the things they did. But I think that people are watching this time. We have lots of lawyers watching, and we're doing it early rather than late. We're not going to do it after we're doing early. That's why you see the lawsuits filed. And we're going to try and say too big to rig. We use the expression. As you get a lot, like Tommy Thompson was telling me, he's never seen such enthusiasm in this state, in Wisconsin. A lot of people have told me that, but they've told me that in other states too. And typically I poll, we're leading. You saw the polls came out today. We're leading. But typically I poll very low. And then, in other words, people, it's a little, I'm not sure it's the nicest. They say, look, we don't want to tell you, and then they vote for Trump, right? That's why the exit polls were so wrong on number one. They didn't want to say who they're voting for, and then the exit polls reflected that. And then at the end of the evening, I won. But all I want is a fair election, that's all. Just a fair, honest election. I hope we're going to get that.
Do you trust the process this time around?
Did I what?
Do you trust the process this time around?
I'll let you know in about 33 days. No, look, 33 days. Yeah, go ahead, please. Blue.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, do you think Israel should retaliate to these missile attacks from Iran? But also, do you believe that you should have been tougher on Iran after they had launched ballistic missiles in 2020 on U.S. forces in Iraq, leaving more than 100 U.S. soldiers injured?
So, first of all, injured. What does injured mean? Injured means you mean because they had a headache, because the bombs never hit the fort. So just so you understand, there was nobody ever tougher in Iraq. They had no money with me. They would have made any deal with me. I would have had a deal made within 1 week after the election. They were dying to make a deal. And when you say not tough, they had no money. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. And when we hit them, they hit us. And they called us. And they said, we're going to shoot at your fort, but we're not going to hit it. And if you were a truthful reporter, which you're not, you would tell the following: none of those very accurate missiles hit our fort. They all hit outside. And there was nobody hurt other than the sound. It was loud. And some people said that hurt, and I accept that. But they told us that they were going to do this and that they weren't going to hurt. And they wanted us to know that because they didn't want us to retaliate. But I essentially bankrupted Iran. They had no money for, and it was a big story. There was no money for Hezbollah. There was no money for Hamas. There was no terrorists. We had no terror attacks. And I think I would have ultimately gotten along with, but there was nobody ever that was tougher on Iran than I was. I took their money away, and they behaved. And I will say, and I said it many times, what Biden should have done, he should have made a deal with them in that first week because they were dying. They had nothing. They were dying to do it. But they did just the opposite. They took all the sanctions off. I had the sanctions that were the toughest. It's like a lot of people say with Russia. Well, I was the one that ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You know that. I think you admit that. I ended it. And then when Biden came in, he approved it. That was the biggest thing ever that Russia's ever done, was the biggest pipeline just about in the world, going to Germany and various places in Europe. And I ended it. And there was nobody tougher on Russia than I was. But with Iran, it's a very sad situation. But we could have made a deal with Iran, and all of this would have never happened. And the reason was I was the toughest by far. Nobody was ever tougher on Iran. But they did. They called us and they told us, we have to retaliate only in the sense that, and they, you know, I think people know this, we have to retaliate, but we're not going to hit anybody. Just keep your people inside the military base. That's what happened. The rockets hit in all areas. And of the 18 rockets that were launched, 6 of them self-destructed, 12 of them approximately, 12 of them arrived. And when they arrived, very accurate rockets, missiles. And when they arrived, they missed the fort. But they had to do that, and I thought it was a very nice thing because they didn't want us to retaliate again. But I was the one that started that. Okay. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Look, Americans are already struggling with inflation under Kamala Harris. How does this supply chain issue going to build up and once again be another disastrous economic episode under Kamala Harris?
It's massive. It's massive. Those workers are very important to the lifeblood of our country, and it's a massive thing. But don't forget, they've been hurt very badly with inflation. You know, those workers, some people would be upset with them and some people not, but those workers were very badly hit with inflation. And, you know, they're not happy, and they do a good job.
Man, thank you for tuning in one more time. You know what time it is. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Even if Trump wins in November, there is just so much to do. Now, Iran. Wow. This motion sensor light in this Airbnb. Okay, so there's so much to do. Now, Iran is bombing Israel. Iran is bombing Israel, Ukraine, and Russia. The U.S. dock workers are on strike. The economy is gone. Inflation high. It's like there's just way too many things to do now. Dang. Ah.
And they also don't want to see certain new technologies, which in many cases don't work very well. I mean, you know, when they modernize sports, a lot of times it doesn't work. There's nobody to talk to. It's very inaccurate. I've heard a lot of complaints about these modernized stations, a lot of very big complaints. But those are really hard workers. I know some of them. And no, that's going to be a tremendous hit. There's another one. Biden shouldn't have let that happen. Not that he should have ended it. He should have worked out a deal between them and the others. He could have worked out a deal. That's an easy deal to work out in a sense because you have a certain power of being the United States. A lot of these are foreign ship owners. And you have a lot of power being the U.S., and that should have been worked out. It's a devastating event for the economy. It's also devastating for inflation because everything's going to cost a lot more because of it. I don't know how long it's going to go on, but I understand the workers' side. I mean, I see both sides. These workers have been devastated by inflation, and the inflation was caused by energy, stupid energy policies, and equally as much by deadhead spending. And that's what they call it. They call it deadhead spending. You know why? Because stupid people do what they did, and that caused inflation. So they were badly hurt. Thank you. Go ahead.
CBS is saying that you have pulled out of a planned interview on 60 Minutes. I'd just like you to address that report, and if you indeed are not doing the interview, explain your reasoning why.
Well, right now they came to me and would like me to do an interview, but first I want to get an apology because the last time I did an interview with them, if you remember, they challenged me on the computer. They said the laptop from hell was from Russia, and I said it wasn't from Russia, it was from Hunter, and I never got an apology, so I'm sort of waiting. I'd love to do 60 Minutes. I do everything. I mean, I do you right now, right? And you're tougher than 60 Minutes, frankly. The laptop from hell was from Hunter. It wasn't from, so I haven't gotten. If you remember Leslie Stahl, we got into a little bit of an argument on the camera talking about that and other things. And, you know, they really owed me an apology. I'll tell you, David Muir, how about David Muir when he said that crime went down? And then the following day, they released the numbers from the Justice Department that crime went up 45%. Where's my apology? They should apologize. They were wrong on everything. So I like to get an apology. So I've asked them for an apology. Let's see if they do it. I wouldn't mind doing 60. I've done 60 Minutes a lot. I did 60 Minutes twice with Mike Wallace, the great Mike Wallace. He was great. His son is from a different ballpark. His son doesn't have, I said, you want to be like your father? Just don't have the talent. Who else, please? Go ahead.
Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you about Milwaukee. Obviously, you're here today in Milwaukee. You were in Dane County. What more do you need to do in the next 30 days to win over the voters in these largely Democratic areas?
I think we're doing well. You know, we just went to Dane, and we had a great time. And the other day, we were, we had 50,000 people. I think it was Friday or Saturday. We had 50,000 people, and we had a small venue because the United States government wouldn't allow us to have enough Secret Service people. So we were forced into having like a 1,000-seat venue, and we had 50,000 people outside. We wanted to do a rally, an outside rally. And when we drove in, I said, boy, that's a big crowd. And I'm used to the biggest of crowds, and this was a big, beautiful crowd. And Washington would not allow us to have the security that was the Secret Service that was necessary. And that happened a little bit with respect to today also. You saw the people. I don't know if anybody was up there, but you saw the people. That crowd was massive. But last week we had a crowd of 50 to 55, 60,000 people, and we had planned an outdoor rally, and it would have been amazing. And Washington would not get us. They said that we have to guard the United Nations, which meant the president of North Korea, who's basically trying to kill me. So they want to guard him, but they don't want to guard me. So we're going to start having it out with them because we've sort of have it. They want to use it. It's like a form of election interference. When they tell you you can't have enough people to guard yourself, I mean, a lot of people show up for what I'm doing. And that's one of the reasons we're going to win. That's like a poll. And we've never had this excitement. Tommy Thompson said it before. We never had the excitement that we have. Now, we've had great excitement. Look, I won it. And the second one, they say lost by 20,000 votes, so sure. But you know what? We did millions of more votes. Everybody does. We did millions and millions more votes the second time. Got the most votes in the history for a sitting president. Sitting president never even came close to that. And we're doing much better. You people reported it, that we're doing much better today than we did with Hillary or we did the second time. So I think we're going to have some good results here.
You spent time in Dane and Milwaukee counties today. In 2020, your campaign sued to throw out the absentee ballots cast by voters in those two counties. What is your message to someone watching in Dane and Milwaukee County who feels they did nothing wrong in 2020? They might support you, but you tried to throw their vote out 4 years ago.
I think they generally agreed with me. My voters generally agreed with me. And I think we have a really good chance of winning it. You know, there are counties that normally a Republican wouldn't win. But if you would see the crowds that we just left, if you'd see the crowds that we had on Saturday, I really think that we're going to win Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's great. And I'm doing a rally in the arena, and I'm doing a rally in Green Bay. And I think we're going to win Wisconsin. I think we might win Wisconsin big. We also have something else that doesn't get reported much, but we have an enthusiasm level that's double or triple what theirs is. The Republicans have, usually it's the other way around, but we have an enthusiasm level that's substantially more than the Democrats' enthusiasm. That's a big thing. Yes, please.
The Supreme Court term begins next week.
Yeah.
If you were to get another Supreme Court pick, what positions must a judge hold for you to consider them?
Honesty, integrity. We want people that are honest. We want great integrity, and we want genius. You know, Supreme Court, you have to be very smart, and we don't want to have people that are not brilliant people. And I know many of the justices, and for the most part, I think they're very brilliant people. You want brilliant people, but you want great integrity, honesty, and, you know, that's, I don't think it should necessarily be along party lines. It usually tends to be that way, but I don't think it's necessary. I think the main thing is they have to be really respected people. They have to be respected. You have to respect our Supreme Court. I think they get treated very unfairly. You know, you have people that go around trying to play the ref with them, and I know these people, and they're really they're scum. They're bad people, and they'll go after not only Supreme Court justices but regular judges, and they'll hit them about, oh, they're not good, they're not smart, they're not. And actually, they're very smart. They're a lot smarter than the people doing the calling out. But they're trying to be Bobby Knight, you know, the great basketball coach who was constantly playing the ref, screaming, screaming, screaming. And he said, maybe I won't win this call, but I'll win the next one. And he was often right. He was a big supporter of mine from Indiana. He was a big supporter of mine, and he was a great coach, but he played the ref. They play the ref by insulting. I don't even know, is it legal to do what they do? I mean, they're so outrageous. But a lot of the judges don't stand for it, and the ones that really are respected don't stand for it. They do what's right.
Are there certain issues that you would like to see the court take up?
No, they have to take up whatever they want to take up. I have no preference. There's certain issues I'd love to see taken up, but they have to do what they have to do. They have that, I'm sure, very well under control. I think the Supreme Court has really made some very brave decisions over the last year, and I think I'm looking at their approval numbers, and they have approval numbers for everything, but I'm looking at their approval numbers go up and up and up. Yeah, please go ahead, right there.
I'm curious, what advice would you give J.D. Vance ahead of his debate tonight?
Have fun. I said, J.D., have fun. That's true. J.D., that's right. We have a big deal going on, and I said, J.D., have a lot of fun. He's a smart guy. He's been amazing. He's been a real warrior. Top student at Yale. He was a very brilliant guy in so many different ways. And, you know, he's a very hard worker. He goes around and he's not afraid of the media. He'd stand here and he'd answer all of your questions. I have a lot of people that wouldn't do that. They don't like doing that. They get shouted at, and they don't like being shouted at. But J.D. is very much a warrior. Very much a warrior. Thank you very much.
On oil prices, Mr. President, on oil prices, thank you. Iris Tao with NTD here. The crude oil prices rose by over 2% today after the latest Iranian attacks on Israel. Are you concerned about major oil supply disruptions affecting the U.S., and do you think Americans are prepared for that? And also, secondly, on China, you mentioned China. Do you think China might be trying to seize this moment, to take advantage of this moment, try to plan an attack on Taiwan and Indo-Pacific theater? Thank you so much.
Well, you never know with President Xi. I had a great relationship, as you know, with President Xi. He's a very smart guy. So I don't want to read his mind, but he's very smart, and he has a way of doing things that's very good for China. And he's at the top of his game. Our people are not at the top of their game, so you never really know. I think that China is going to be a very interesting subject over the next couple of years. You know, China's having a lot of problems right now. You know, the economy is having some big problems. They just issued very big stimulus, but it's someplace, and he's a very, I mean, people get upset when I say it, but he's a very fierce person. He really is. He's a fierce warrior. He's a fierce challenger. But I had a very good relationship with him. Okay, a couple of more. Go ahead, please. Go ahead, behind you.
You said 2 can play a bad game when talking.
Thank you. You've said two can play at that game when talking about the Department of Justice. How would you use the DOJ if you're reelected?
Well, I think it's terrible what they've done. They've weaponized government to an extent that's nobody's ever seen before. It's done in third world countries, banana republics. But I mean, like as an example, they said, "Oh, the documents case, the documents case." Well, he was guilty. They basically said he's guilty, but he's incompetent. He's allowed to be president, but he's not allowed to go to court. It was a strange ruling. But I was exonerated from my case. That was a big case, as you know. Down in Florida, we had I don't know the judge, but a brilliant judge, totally brilliant judge. And I was exonerated and fully exonerated. And I can only say this, that, you know, when I stand here and I watch the questions being asked by people that are somewhat hostile, many people that are fair. I mean, you have a lot of different talents in this room. I was just thinking to myself, I really, all I want to see is fairness. Our country needs you so badly. The media, you're like the policemen and women of the world. You're so important. You keep politicians honest. You keep politicians from doing really bad things. You're so important. And it's so important that the media be fair and really improve, because I watch how unfair it is and how one-sided it is. And you need the media to really buck up in this country, because nobody's ever seen anything like it. And I can tell you, I don't want any favors. I just want fairness. I want like a level playing field. And if we can get the media back to a level playing field, that's going to do a lot for the good of our country, because we have to make a comeback. Our country is a failing nation. This is a failing nation. We're failing at the borders. We're failing at everything we're doing. You look at the numbers. We lost $2 trillion this year. $2 trillion. You know, people don't report that. Our country, we have a deficit of $2 trillion. It was never a deficit in the history of the world like that. And one of the reasons I'm going to bring Elon Musk in to negotiate a lot of that. He's very good at it, and he's a great guy, and he loves the country. He really loves the country. It's not easy for him to do an endorsement. You know, he endorsed me. But, Brian, I would say it's not easy for him to do an endorsement, right? He's got a lot of different factions, a lot of different sides. But he wants to save the country. And, you know, I tell you the airplane story. I could tell you 20 other stories just like it. We have to be a lot different. We have to run a lot different. We are a failing nation, but we're not going to be a failing nation for long, I predict. I hope we're going to have a great victory, a big victory, and then we're going to straighten out our country. We're going to seal up our borders, and we're going to let a lot of people into our country, but they're going to come in legally. We had Remain in Mexico, and for some reason he voided that immediately, and she did. I guess she did, because she was in charge of the border. And I hate to see that when somebody was so bad at the border and then tries to pretend like she wasn't even involved. This was the worst border in the history of the world, not here, the history of the world. There's never been a border like that. I always say third world countries would have used sticks and stones to keep people out if that happened to them. There's never been anything like it. And the press doesn't want to report about it, and they've got to report about it. It's a big story. To me, it's the biggest story. When you allow 13,000 murderers into our country, and they're free to kill, they're free to kill. These are people that are rough, tough, horrible people. It's not going to be a positive thing. When you allow thousands of terrorists from very tough countries into our country, they're here. We don't even know who they are. We know they're terrorists, and we know something about some of them, but generally we don't. But we know there are thousands of terrorists let into our country. Drug dealers are in our country at levels we've never seen before. We're really, you know, we're a very sick country, but we're going to figure it out, and we're going to get it fixed. Yeah, go ahead.
You've got one of the biggest. I predict you have one of the biggest rallies coming up on Saturday in Butler, attendance-wise. Can you give me a preview of that and what's going through your mind going back to Butler?
Butler, that's right, it's going to be on Saturday, and it's going to be an amazing rally. You know, Butler has become quite a famous place. It's like a monument now. People ride through the streets of Butler looking at as though it were a monument. It's very important. We lost a great person, Corey the fireman and two other people were supposedly going to die, and they ended up living because they're great doctors up there. These doctors, two separate doctors, one was just hit badly and the other was hit really badly. They were both, first thing I said is, how many people are dead? Because, we had a massive crowd as far as the eye could see, and there was no empty areas, so when bullets are fired, they're going to hit people. And these are AR-15 bullets. They were going over my head. I heard them. I didn't know you could hear bullets, but they are 4,000 miles an hour or something, and they're going over my head. And I was amazed that they just said three. They said probably 3 dead. That was my only, and then 2 of the 3. And I'm very happy to report a friend of mine. Some people have heard this, but he said, I'd like to make a contribution. These people live good. There's no crime there. It's beautiful in many ways, but not a lot of money. And they had a great relationship. Corey and his wife was really nice, and 2 daughters. He was killed jumping on top of the daughters. He didn't want the daughters to be hit. And when he jumped on top, he got hit. He got hit really badly. There was a National Guardsman that was seated 9 seats away, and we're going to give him something for what he did. Corey was hit in the head, bleeding profusely, and this National Guardsman went over to Corey, saw that he was still living, and gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And nobody's ever seen anything like it. And it was tough. And then Corey died. But for that man to do that was amazing, actually. So, I'm very pleased to report. So a friend of mine, rich guy, member of Mar-a-Lago, said, I'd like to make a contribution to the family of Corey, the firefighter. And I said, well, that would be nice. And I said, where is it? He gives me a check, and it was for $1 million. I gave it to Corey's wife, $1 million. But bigger than that, we did a GoFundMe, and I think we picked up about $6 million, and we're giving her, I guess, about 4. She'll end up with about $5 million. And she said to me, I'd rather have my husband. I understood that. It was such a beautiful thing to say. But she said, I'd rather have my husband. Now, they never saw $1 million or $5 million. This is a tremendous amount of money for them. And the other gentlemen are getting more than $1 million apiece. And we went out, and that was the public. I mean, it's amazing. So we're going to be there on Saturday. It's going to be a really big event, and it's going to be something, we'll celebrate the life of Corey, I think. And I want to celebrate the 2 gentlemen that got hit really bad. I mean, and we should celebrate their doctors. Who would think you go up into sort of the country, right? The country, and you have 2 doctors that took 2 men that were so badly wounded, and they saved their lives, right? And just very talented people. There are a lot of talented people in our country. So that'll be exciting. And the question is, how am I going to start the speech? And I think I was going to say, as I was saying, because that's about where I was. I was very early, and if I didn't have that chart, which I always bring up, I rarely bring it up, but when I do, it's always at the end of the speech, and it's on my left, and here it was the first moment of the speech, and it was on my right. Had I not made that turn, I would not be speaking to you people today, and some of you would be extremely happy about that, I suspect. But I want to thank you all, and I'm now going to Texas, going to Houston, and we have some big things there, and we're traveling. I think I'm booked every single day for 33 days, and as you probably have heard, I've worked for 17 or 18 days, wouldn't you say, in a row, and I'm working even when I'm not working, but we're doing a lot of things. We made a lot of different speeches. We're starting up the rallies again, very big, and we have more enthusiasm than we've ever had, and all we want to do is very simple. We want to make America great again. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the live show. You know what time it is. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. If you read what I just said in the chat, I said Ukraine and Russia. Okay? None of this was happening with the OG Donald J. Trump, the 45th. Some people say he might be the 47th. Israel and the Palestinian people. Nobody ever spoke about that. Now, Iran just retaliated with Israel. None of this was happening. The Biden administration has sent a lot to Ukraine. Now, according to New York Post, $567 million in defense support has been sent to Taiwan. None of this was happening with Trump. Inflation is going crazy. Hurricane Helene just happened. North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, some part of Georgia. Yeah, we need help. We need help. Take care of your home first. As a father of a 4-year-old daughter, my first priority is my family. My first priority is my daughter, my family first before I take care of other people. You have to take care of home first. Take care of your people first. That's your job as a leader. Your job is to provide and protect for your people. Man.
We are following breaking news. Iran launching a barrage of missiles into Israel. A major escalation in the conflict in the Middle East. I'm Anderson Cooper alongside my colleague Wolf Blitzer. We've witnessed missiles intercepted across Israel a short time ago as air raid sirens went off on the ground below. The Israeli military now confirms some of those missiles made a direct impact in central and southern Israel. It's estimated Iran launched nearly 200 projectiles. Iran says this attack was in response for the killing of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah and other assassinations.
A source says the Israeli security cabinet is in their emergency bunker right now, and the Israeli military says Iran's attack, and I'm quoting now, will have consequences. The White House says both President Biden and Vice President Harris are in the White House Situation Room monitoring the situation. We're standing by to get an immediate update from White House officials and from the U.S. State Department. We also expect to hear from the Pentagon. I want to show you the moment CNN crews saw the Iranian missiles entering Tel Aviv's airspace earlier this afternoon. Watch this.
This is a major attack. Jim Sciutto, this is obviously
it's a major attack.
Ladies and gentlemen, look at where we are. Open your eyes, bro. Is this what you want? Now we're going to hear another large sum of money sent to them. This ain't cool, bro. Nothing like this ever happened. Nothing like this ever happened because nobody wanted smoke with the OG. Nobody wanted smoke with the OG Trump, bro. Man, double tap your screen and subscribe to the channel.
There's no
what
question.
You are seeing, what we are all seeing with our own eyes, is a major attack from Iran.
It's a major attack, Dana, and it's an escalation. It's an escalation of this war beyond what we saw. I think potentially beyond what we saw in April when Iran launched dozens of missiles and drones. This attack, according to U.S. intelligence, principally or perhaps entirely ballistic missiles, which are the fastest by far and the most dangerous.
تعال شوفها من هون تعال شوفها من هون ماما ولكم شوفوا فوق هي شوفوا فوقيه هون هي
Holy sh**.
Never seen this ever in my life. What the heck?
What we're seeing in addition to those intercepts is we're seeing fragments falling to the ground. It's like a deadly fireworks display over Tel Aviv. Goodness, there was an impact just to the left of us here.
And you're talking about Tel Aviv, Jim. We are looking at pictures right now. We are looking at pictures of Tel Aviv, what you're describing.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
Oh, God. Okay, guys, we got to get off the roof. These are coming down right next to us here.
Please do, Jim. Please do.
They're coming down. One just about. We got to go inside.
So that was roughly an hour and a half ago. I want to go back to Jim Sciutto, who is still in Tel Aviv, back on the roof. He saw it cover at a certain point about an hour or so ago. Jim, just talk about first of all, how are things right now? And talk a little bit about the video that we just saw, what we were looking at.
So right now, I should be clear, the air raid sirens have ended, and there was an announcement, in fact, a short time ago saying it's okay to return safely. And as I understand it, even Iranian officials have said that this attack, from their perspective, is over. But let me describe, as this was happening, to be clear, it's our whole team here, and you know well, Anderson, that there's a lot of folks that go into getting images like that on the air. What we were seeing was not just the incoming missiles, but the whole array of Israeli air defenses firing to intercept those missiles. And it's multi-layered around the city, both in terms of the altitudes they strike, but also just layers of defenses. And as it struck me as I was watching it, is that they were coming to a meeting point in the sky just above us, just to the east of us here, but also increasingly above our heads, so that we could see the missile fragments, as you're seeing there, coming down, or perhaps the intercepted missiles, once they'd completed their mission, perhaps struck a target, coming down. And the one you just saw right there on the screen, because I believe that's the top of our hotel there with the blue light, came just to the right of us. And once it was clear to me, Anderson and Wolf, that these intercepts were taking place above our heads, gravity works, we decided to go inside until that particular barrage was over. Then there was a pause. In between, we came out again, and then there was a second barrage of about the same duration. So at least dozens of missiles, it seems. And I find it remarkable, frankly, that there were no casualties, as Admiral Hagari just said a short time ago, because in addition to those impacts that you're seeing there on the air, there was quite a large one just to the north of us, with flames and smoke rising off in the distance. So I think that folks were listening to those air raid signals. Thankfully, they were going into shelters. They have a lot of experience with that here, and there was probably some good fortune involved that prevented there being casualties. I should note, though, we mentioned this earlier, there were casualties tonight in Tel Aviv, 8 people killed at a light rail station, a shooting at a light rail station just before those missiles started falling, and Israeli authorities say they're investigating that as a potential terrorist attack.
I want to go now to our Ben Wiedemann, who is standing by in Beirut. Ben, explain what you heard from your vantage point in Beirut as these strikes were going on in Israel.
What we saw, Anderson, was fireworks over the southern suburbs of Beirut, an area where Hezbollah has many supporters. We also heard celebratory gunfire. And I'm watching, as I'm speaking to you, Hezbollah's TV station, El Manar, is running loops of incoming missiles hitting Israel. So clearly there is, among those supporters of Hezbollah, there is a certain amount of satisfaction seeing this happen, keeping in mind that 2 weeks ago with the pager attacks, the walkie-talkie attacks, and over the last 8 days, punishing Israeli airstrikes, and of course last Friday the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah. Certainly Hezbollah has taken just one body blow after another. So clearly there are certain elements within Lebanese society that are taking satisfaction at what is going on at the moment. Not necessarily the broader population in Lebanon, many of whom have just been sitting watching television with a certain amount of dread, certainly over the last 24 hours, as we've seen Israel start limited ground operations so far into the south. But certainly this additional development of these extensive Iranian missile strikes on Israel certainly raises the level of concern to heights we haven't seen yet. Anderson?
Let me pick it up. It's Wolf. Ben, as you know, and most of our viewers should know by now, the Hezbollah forces in South Lebanon have accumulated thousands of rockets and drones and missiles, potentially that could be aimed towards Israel. I haven't seen a huge, I mean, they've been doing it a lot. They started October 8th, the day after October 7th. They began Hezbollah launching some of these rockets and missiles towards Israel. But given their capabilities, and the assumption by U.S. intelligence, Israeli intelligence, was that Hezbollah always had a major threat, potential threat to Israel. Why haven't the Hezbollah forces in South Lebanon launched more of these projectiles towards Israel?
It's important to note, Wolf, that the projectiles they launch from southern Israel tend to be short range, focused on Israeli military positions along the border. They have longer range missiles that we do not believe they keep in that area where, as we've seen, there's a high probability of an Israeli ground incursion. Those are kept further north, away from the Israelis. Why haven't they used them so far? That's a question many people here are asking. It probably has something to do with the fact that what we've seen going back to July 30th is the gradual and increasingly rapid elimination of many of the senior commanders of Hezbollah. And of course, Hassan Nasrallah last Friday. Now, yesterday we did hear from one of the senior deputy of Nasrallah, Naim Qasim, who said in a television broadcast that despite these blows, Hezbollah has not collapsed, that they still are able to function. Now, the question is the fact that they haven't fired some of their longer, heavier weaponry, is it because of the elimination of the military command, or is it because they're holding it in reserve in the event there is a full-on invasion of southern Lebanon? And certainly we are getting indications from, for instance, warnings on Twitter from the Arabic spokesman for the Israeli military about telling people essentially to go tens of kilometers north away from southern Lebanon. The indications are there may well be a full-on Israeli invasion of the south, in which case there's a much higher probability that Hezbollah, which already feels crippled and cornered, may unleash its heaviest weapons yet. Wolf?
And some of those heaviest weapons potentially could reach not only Haifa in northern Israel, but even Tel Aviv and perhaps even further south in Israel. And the Israelis.
This right here is not looking good, guys. This is not looking good. What is going on? Pray, guys. You need to pray. I don't care who you're voting for, Trump, Harris. It doesn't matter at this point. You just have to pray because anything is possible. Okay? We want peace, worldwide peace. Because if there's no peace, all your dreams that you're chasing, all that stuff you're chasing, you ain't going to be able to chase it. You better be praying for world peace at this point.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jesse Waters, along with Judge Jeanine Pirro, Jessica Tarlov, Dana Perino, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. Fox News alert, we're just hours away from the huge vice presidential debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance. But first, the world's on the brink of war, with Joe and Kamala at the helm. Israel is planning their next steps after getting attacked by Iran, the terrorist-supporting regime, firing over 100 missiles at the Jewish state. Joe and Kamala trying to act like they're on top of things after Iran attacked Israel. Watch this.
The United States military actively supported the defense of Israel, and we're still assessing the impact. But based on what we know now, the attack appears to have been defeated and ineffective. And this is testament to Israeli military capability and U.S. military.
Let's go right to Trey Yingst in Israel. Trey.
Yeah, Jesse, this was a significant attack that took place across Israel earlier today. The Iranians firing more than 180 ballistic missiles at this country. Some of them were intercepted by Israel's Arrow 3 missile defense system, but others slammed into the ground below. We also understand that the Israeli cabinet is meeting tonight to determine what their response will be to this attack that sent millions of people to bomb shelters. We could see here from the city of Haifa in the northern part of Israel, as these missile defense systems were active, they were picking off the ballistic missiles that were soaring through the air. And again, this is significant because it is the first time, according to Iranian state television, that the Iranians used the Fateh 4 hypersonic ballistic missile. Back in April, when Iran attacked Israel, they didn't use hypersonic ballistic missiles of this caliber, the latest that they have in their arsenal. And so as we look forward, there are major questions about how the Israelis will respond. But Fox News has talked with Israeli officials tonight in Tel Aviv, and they indicate it is not a question of if Israel will respond, but rather when and where. Guys?
Troy, thank you. Donald Trump knows exactly who's to blame for Joe and Kamala's latest foreign policy disaster. Take a look.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. When I was president, Iran was in total check. The Iranians were starved for cash. Iran was on the verge of bankruptcy. They had no money left. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah, the people they're fighting now. They would have been willing to make any deal. You could have made any deal, but Kamala flooded them with American cash.
All right, Judge Jeanine, this is tough now. Right now in October, world seems like it's falling apart.
Yeah, it's not just this, it's the longshoremen, it's the economy, everything's going on. But you know, what's interesting about this is you'll recall that Iran, as Trey Yanks just referenced, they shot some missiles over in April. And that was in response to Israel apparently bombing an embassy in Syria, the Iranian embassy in Syria. This is a little more serious, but make no mistake, Iran wants to be the funder of Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. They want them to go out and do the fighting. They'll fund them, they'll train them, they'll teach them how to fight, but the blood is only going in one direction. So Iran doesn't really have the capability or capacity to do the kind of damage that everyone thinks they can. And even their own people in Iran are starting to be frustrated with that country. I think what's gone on is that they are sensing that Israel has the upper hand, given the fact that Nasrallah was taken down and the upper echelon of the Hezbollah, the pagers, the walkie-talkies, 3,000 killed and injured, I should say. And now it appears that, Israel is on the march in Lebanon, as well they should be. But all the United States says is ceasefire. Joe Biden last night, ceasefire now. That was the quote. And the truth is that Hezbollah, which is even worse and more sophisticated than Hamas, violated a UN resolution from 2006, like almost immediately, and the UN and everybody's cool with it. But as soon as Israel tries to defend itself, then there's a problem. JCPOA, they got the money. We didn't monitor it. They told us that they were going to spend it whatever way they wanted. Iran is selling oil on the open market. And so as a result, we are funding terrorism. And until that ends, or until somebody wins, we talk about diplomacy, but at some point, maybe somebody has to win here.
Jessica Tarloff.
Well, I feel and I hope that Israel is on the precipice of winning this. It's been an incredible couple of weeks and, frankly, an incredible few months going back to April when they did manage to hit that embassy. I think that Bibi Netanyahu, for however people feel about him, generally speaking, has garnered a lot of goodwill and praise for the type of leader he is for this, the kind of statecraft that this took, the kind of spycraft that it took, and feels as though the IDF is the only force that could have pulled something like this off. Iran looks weak in this. I understand it is very serious. I was speaking to a friend whose family lives in Israel, said they are all in bomb shelters. There is not one person that is out walking around right now, but Iran has been humiliated because of what Israel has pulled off in terms of destructing Hamas, then with Hezbollah as well, and they needed to do something. To the point that Joe Biden has just said ceasefire now, that's not true. The goal is a ceasefire, obviously, but he has said firmly we stand with Israel. They are using our missiles to kill these terrorists. They're firing off of our aircraft carriers. We are part of this fight with them. And the narrative that Iran was completely contained and did nothing while Donald Trump was president, the Iranians fired missiles at U.S. bases, and over 100 service members had traumatic brain injury. And that was when Donald Trump was president. So this narrative does not hold up. Joe Biden and Kamala are not responsible for what has happened since October 7th. There obviously were questions about what intelligence failures there were, but that lays at the feet of Bibi Netanyahu, not at the U.S. president and the U.S. vice president.
I want to make one thing clear. You said it was a lie. Joe Biden said yesterday,
you said
ceasefire
that's
now.
all he says, and
No,
I said
wait a minute. Wait a minute. He said ceasefire now last night. That's what I said.
But that's all you said. You said all Joe Biden says is ceasefire.
He said ceasefire on October 8th.
Well,
I mean, come on.
One of the differences, Dan, is that under the Trump administration, the Iranians never took Americans hostage like they have seen now in Israel through Hamas.
So the irony of some of this is that Biden wants to talk about his capabilities in diplomacy. And he's made a lot of international phone calls. We talked about like the world. It's like there's a lot of things going on. It's not just in the Middle East, but of course we know in Europe as well and elsewhere, including Africa, all these places. And it's complicated and there's a lot of it. But he wants to be given praise for the diplomacy because he was the Senate Foreign Relations Chairman and he knows all the leaders and he can call them. But he doesn't want to be judged on the outcomes. And what Biden has been saying to Netanyahu over this past year is, okay, enough, take the win. Take the win. And I think what Netanyahu should say to Biden tonight is, no, sir, take the win. Let's go. Let's press the advantage. We have helped Western civilization get to a point that you could be on offense again against radical Islamic terrorism. So join the side that you're on and let's do this together. So one thing about tonight in the vice presidential debate, I do expect for this to come up. And just the one thing is because this election is so close, I was talking to Ari Fleischer on the show yesterday at Newsroom, and in Pennsylvania, for example, Jewish Americans could make up a difference. If the race is that close, and you are a Jewish American, who I interviewed one last week who said, I'm a single issue voter, and my issue is Israel. Does Israel continue to exist? I think that they'll be listening to hear what Walz and Vance say about what they would do if they were ever to become commander-in-chief, or if they can articulate what Harris and Trump would do.
GG.
Yeah, well, this is stuff that's been going on since I was a youngin'.
That's true.
You know, it doesn't matter who's president, really. It's just stuff happens. But I feel in this case, it's good not to listen to Joe in this. Israel has no reason to. You know, on October 8th, they went from wanting to deciding. And the decision was to exact justice for an atrocity. And we should understand that. If anybody were to say, hey, you should exercise restraint, to me, after something like that, I would be polite, but it would have absolutely no impact on what I plan to do. If anything, I'm amazed at Israel's restraint, and I'm impressed by their precision and methodical response. I mean, Iran is, you know, Israel's playing chess and Iran is playing Yahtzee. Compare their responses. You know, Iran is lobbing these missiles onto a country's capital. And Israel took out the entire command of Hezbollah with little to no collateral damage. And this is going to be talked about for ages to come. Even Hollywood couldn't make this up. And I'm sure Israel already planned for this, has something, you know, they know what Iran's going to do. But Israel, you have to understand, and I said this before, that you kind of have to like let Israel do Israel. They think like warriors because they have to. It's not their choice. We don't think like that anymore because we're surrounded by oceans and we're blessed with wealth and power. You know, imagine if we had used the Israeli beeper and phone strategy on fentanyl dealers, but we don't. We don't. You know, we're not allowed to. That's in a way, you know, I watched Israel's clear-eyed purpose in protecting their country. And I guess I'm jealous. Yeah. I'm jealous when I look at our borders, when I look at our crime, and I see how this progressive mentality has brought us here and how they are so steadfast in letting that mentality, you know, corrupt their dedication to protecting their homeland.
Well said, Greg.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Really?
Wow, you two are being nice.
I didn't mean that, but well said. Click here to.
Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard from Fox News when it came down to reacting to the Israel and Iran situation going on. I just hope this doesn't spiral and become something really massive. That's what we don't want. If it spirals and becomes something massive, then it's going to be a big deal. We don't want to have anything massive. But the fact is, you never had anything like this happen during the OG, during the 45th. You never had anything like that. You never had anything like Ukraine and Russia. None of these things was a conversation. Now we're funding Taiwan.
A considerable amount. President Trump has expectations for J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance knows, as Robert Costa so thoroughly laid out, at age 40, his entire political career is ahead of him. If this ticket does not prevail, the Republican Party will find itself in an uncomfortable and unwelcome and unwanted post-Trump era. What role does J.D. Vance play in that? A considerable amount of that decision will be drawn from what he does tonight. He knows that. In contrast, Governor Walz is 60, 1 year older than Kamala Harris. He does not have any obvious designs on the presidency if Kamala Harris wins and serves out 2 terms. He's there to enhance the ticket as it exists and amplify things on the positive side where and when he can. Very different calculations, very different risk factors for the two.
And Bob, even if you're Bob Dole, who had a bad night in 1976, he was the nominee 20 years later for the Republican Party. So you can even rescue yourself from a bad night. What are your final thoughts on tonight?
Everybody in the press, when we're in the press galleries, on the campaign planes, they talk about these vice presidential debates as low impact, but they really are high stakes. Everybody watching tonight knows one of these two men could become president of the United States. The country is going to take a temperature on character, on policy. Who are these people who might lead the country? And one of them might be leading the country should a crisis happen, a heartbeat away from the presidency. We live in a time of assassination attempts on the Republican nominee, of political violence, and of aging politicians. So it's no question that one day one of these people could be president. We hope all people live healthy lives and serve full terms, but you never know in American history. That's what the history always tells us.
Nancy, the other big event is these incredible floods in North Carolina, which also is a platform for presidents.
It is, because handling of natural disasters is often a proxy for voters of competence. They look at how you handle something like that, and they say this person is capable of handling big, important things. And that's why President Biden tomorrow is heading to North Carolina and South Carolina, and Florida and Georgia the next day.
And here we see the vice presidential candidates there. Tim Walz standing a lone man behind his lectern. Ed, give us your last thoughts as we watch here as J.D. Vance is off in the wings for the moment. Oh, there he is.
It's performance, performance, performance. That seems obvious, but no faux pas. And they're looking for a viral moment. That's what they'll be looking for tonight.
No handshake.
No handshake, and there you have Governor Walz appears to be taking some notes. J.D. Vance doing the same as our colleagues.
And they may have shaken hands before the cameras came.
That's right.
Oh, okay.
Well, we have the vice presidential debate coming up in a moment. It will be moderated by our own Norah O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz take the stage. Well, they've taken the stage, so stick with us here and join us also on our streaming channel, CBS News 24/7, for exclusive content you won't see anywhere else. Thank you for joining us.
It's about to go down.
Tonight, with just over a month to go until Election Day, the first and only meeting between the two men who hope to become vice president of the United States. Democratic Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota and Republican Senator J.D. Vance of Ohio.
Now, this is likely the final debate of this election cycle, and voting is already underway in 20 states. CBS News polling shows this remains a race either presidential candidate could win. The CBS News vice presidential debate starts now.
Fight for every single vote, and we're going to take this country back.
And we are ready to continue to build the future together.
We're going to turn this whole country red with President Donald J. Trump's leadership.
You know what's at the end of this little journey? Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States.
This is a CBS News special, live from CBS News headquarters in New York. America Decides, the vice presidential debate.
Good evening, I'm Norah O'Donnell, and thank you for joining us for tonight's CBS News vice presidential debate. We want to welcome our viewers on CBS, on other networks here in the U.S. and around the world. We have a consequential night ahead, and our focus is the issues that matter to you, the voter. Let's introduce the candidates. Minnesota's Democratic Governor Tim Walz and Ohio's Republican Senator J.D. Vance tonight meeting for the first time.
I'm Margaret Brennan. In order to have a thoughtful and civil debate, these are the rules that both campaigns have agreed to. Questions will be directed at one candidate, who will have 2 minutes to respond. The other candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for rebuttal. Then each candidate will get another minute to make further points, with an additional 1 minute each at the discretion of the moderator. The primary role of the moderators is to facilitate the debate between the candidates, enforce the rules, and provide the candidates with the opportunity to fact-check claims made by each other.
CBS News reserves the right to mute the candidates' microphones to maintain decorum. We have not shared the questions or topics with the campaigns. The stage is set. Governor, Senator, thank you for joining us. Let's get started. Tonight, our country is facing several unfolding crises. The Middle East is on the brink of war. Americans are suffering from the catastrophic impact of Hurricane Helene, and now a labor strike as 25,000 dock workers from Maine to Texas are picketing. We're going to begin tonight with the Middle East. Margaret.
Thank you, Norah. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed, thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States to have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever met. And both of his secretaries of defense and his national security advisors said he should be nowhere near the White House. Now, the person closest to them, Donald Trump, said he's unfit for the highest office. That was Senator Vance. What we've seen out of Vice President Harris is we've seen steady leadership. We've seen a calmness that is able to draw on the coalitions to bring them together, understanding that our allies matter. When our allies see Donald Trump turn towards Vladimir Putin, turn towards North Korea, when we start to see that type of fickleness around holding the coalitions together, we will stay committed. And as the vice president said today We will protect our forces and our allied forces, and there will be consequences.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, the same question. Would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
So, Margaret, I want to answer the question. First of all, thanks, Governor. Thanks to CBS for hosting the debate. And thanks, most importantly, to the American people who are watching this evening and caring enough about this country to pay attention to this vice presidential debate. I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are. I was raised in a working-class family. My mother required food assistance for periods of her life. My grandmother required Social Security help to raise me, and she raised me in part because my own mother struggled with addiction for a big chunk of my early life. I went to college on the GI Bill after I enlisted in the Marine Corps and served in Iraq. And so I stand here asking to be your vice president with extraordinary gratitude for this country, for the American dream that made it possible for me to live my dreams. And most importantly, I know that a lot of you are worried about the chaos in the world and the feeling that the American dream is unattainable. I want to try to convince you tonight over the next 90 minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look, it is up to Israel what they think they need to do to keep their country safe, and we should support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance it. Donald Trump pulled that program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's fickle leadership. And when Iran shot down an American aircraft in international airspace, Donald Trump tweeted, because that's the standard diplomacy of Donald Trump. And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause parts of its nuclear program, and President Trump did exit that deal. He recently said, just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make a diplomatic deal with Iran because the consequences are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world. Donald Trump has already done it once before. Ask yourself at home, when was the last time, I'm 40 years old, when was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. Nora?
Margaret, thank you. Let's turn now to Hurricane Helene. The storm could become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger, and more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try and reduce the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today, actually, a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then, of course, afterwards, to help the people in those communities rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I know very personally in Appalachia, all across the Southeast. They need their government to do their job, and I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. Now, Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest economy in the entire world. What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to? More energy production in China, more manufacturing overseas, more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean the amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually care about getting cleaner air and cleaner water, the best thing to do is to double down and invest in American workers and the American people. And unfortunately, Kamala Harris has done exactly the opposite.
Governor Walz, you have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, we got close to an agreement because all those things are happening. Look, first of all, it is a horrific tragedy with this hurricane. And my heart goes out to the folks that are down there in contact with the governors. I serve as co-chair of the Council of Governors as we work together on these emergency managements. Governors know no partisanship. They work together. So all of the governors and the emergency responders are on the ground. Those happen on the front end. The federal government comes in, makes sure they're there to that we recover. But we're still in that phase where we need to make sure that they're staying there, staying focused. Now, look, coming back to the climate change issue, there's no doubt this thing roared onto the scene faster and stronger than anything we've seen. Senator Vance has said that there's a climate problem in the past. Donald Trump called it a hoax and then joked that these things would make more beachfront property to be able to invest in. What we've seen out of the Harris administration now, the Biden-Harris administration, is we've seen this investment. We've seen massive investments, the biggest in global history that we've seen in the Inflation Reduction Act, has created jobs all across the country. 2,000 in Jeffersonville, Ohio, taking the EV technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy. So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what absolutely makes sense. And then we start thinking about how do we mitigate these disasters.
Thank you. Senator, I want to give you an opportunity to respond there. The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not what they're doing. So clearly, Kamala Harris herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the Democrats will use here. And I'm talking, of course, about the Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing
Senator,
worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil. But the folks know, and like I said again, these are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense. Look, our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota this summer. And thinking about how do we respond to that, we're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the future. How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of? But to call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives to Mar-a-Lago, say, give me money for my campaign, and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that, and an all-above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
Governor, your time is up. The overwhelming consensus among scientists is that the Earth's climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
Governor, do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things, regarding children?
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the fentanyl, because this is a crisis of this, the opioid crisis. And the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our nation's history, 30% decrease in Ohio. But there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state and a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug interventions. But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill on immigration that this nation's seen. It was crafted by a conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Lankford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said, this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And the Chamber of Commerce and the Wall Street Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped get there. 1,500 new border agents, detection for drugs, DOJ money to speed up these the adjudications on this, just what America wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually did some of these things? And they need to be done by the legislature. You can't just do this through the executive branch. So look, we have the options to do this. Donald Trump had 4 years. He had 4 years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be. I'll build you a big, beautiful wall, and Mexico will pay for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't pay a dime. But here we are again, 9 years after he came down that escalator, dehumanizing people and telling them what he was going to do. As far as the deportation plan, at one point, Senator Vance said it was so unworkable to be laughable. So that's where we're at. Pass the bill, she'll sign it.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, the question was, will you separate parents from their children, even if their kids are U.S. citizens? You have 1 minute.
Margaret, my point is that we already have massive child separations thanks to Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing that she did when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to undo 94 Donald Trump executive actions that opened the border. This problem is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president again.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, what about our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations?
Look, we fix this issue with a bill that is necessary. But the issue on this is what happens when you don't want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield. The Republican governor said, it's not true. Don't do it. There's consequences for this. There's consequences. We could come together. Senator Lankford did it. We could come together and solve this if we didn't let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue. And the consequences in Springfield were the governor had to send state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance wants to solve this, but by standing with Donald Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize and villainize other human beings.
Tim,
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this? Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico, you've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, well, it is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it. That's because they know we need to do this. Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators buying up housing and making them less affordable, but it becomes a blame. Look, this bill also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles. I don't talk about my faith a lot, but Matthew 25:40 talks about, to the least amongst us you do unto me. I think that's true of most Americans. They simply want order to it. This bill does it. It's funded. It's supported by the people who do it. And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you, Governor. And just to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status. Temporary protected status.
Well, Margaret, but
thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important because
we're going to turn now to the economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that you guys weren't going to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border wand. That is not a person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That is the facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by our own leadership.
Thank you, Senator, for describing the legal process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
Those laws have been on the books since 1990.
Thank you, gentlemen.
The CBP One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Thank you, Margaret. The economy is a top concern for voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan, so let's talk about the specifics. Governor Walz, Vice President Harris unveiled a plan that includes billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala Harris and I do believe in the middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed under this plan with down payment assistance on the front end to get you in a house. A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that. Look, the $35 insulin is a good thing, but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20% consumption or sales tax on everything we bring in. Everyone agrees, including businesses, it would be destabilizing it, it would increase inflation and potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do, we'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best, more people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer, a lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do. And some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country. That is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage since the Great Depression. 9 million jobs closed on that. That was day one, whether it was the Infrastructure Act or other things we moved. Now, you made a question about experts, said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted. Look, if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years, and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that. We're just asking for fairness in it, and that's all you want.
You have a minute.
Governor, you say trust the experts. But those same experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods. They lied about that. They said if we shipped our industrial base off to other countries, to Mexico and elsewhere, it would make the middle class stronger. They were wrong about that. They were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it. And for the first time in a generation, Donald Trump had the wisdom and the courage to say to that bipartisan consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs, the pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our children are manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening to experts. We're going to stop it by listening to common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is Donald Trump was the guy who created the largest trade deficit in American history with China. So the rhetoric is good. Much of what the senator said right there, I'm in agreement with him on this. I watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult. We had companies that were willing to ship it over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital in some cases, putting money into companies that were overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing jobs just out of the IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice, what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a gross generalization.
that he did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here, because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you've simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on health care then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to ahead, gentlemen, on many topics. But right now, I want to talk about personal qualifications. The vice president is often the last voice the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz, you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year. Can you explain that discrepancy?
Yeah, well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look, I grew up in small rural Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the streetlights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17, worked on family farms, and then I used the GI Bill to become a teacher, passionate about it, a young teacher. My first year out, I got the opportunity in the summer of '89 to travel to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that. I came back home and then started a program to take young people there. We would take basketball teams, we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at. Look, I will be the first to tell you, I have poured my heart into my community. I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that. Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice. So look, my commitment has been from the beginning to make sure that I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there, the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned a lot about China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't start a trade war that he ends up losing. So this is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
Governor, just to follow up on that, the question was, can you explain the discrepancy?
All I said on this is I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just, that's what I've said. So I was in Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
Thank you, Governor. Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate, Donald Trump, unfit for the nation's highest office, and you said he could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, and you've said you regret those comments and explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his record. But most importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out to messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think that we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration, it's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says. But look, this issue is what's on everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duval, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is, well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about health care. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in health care for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
I'm going to respond on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator?
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was. And maybe you're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me, but as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen, do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
But how?
I've given this advice on a lot of things, that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business on this. Things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget, Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back with much more of the CBS News vice presidential debate in just a moment.
No, JD smoked. He smoked my boy.
On our places, bright shiny faces. When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your
Bro. Oh. Who is serving the cold lemonade, guys? We need someone serving the cold lemonade to give JD a cold lemonade, bro. Who is serving the cold lemonade, my dog? Walls, Walls, Walls should have declined this debate at this point because he's not even saying, bro, this man ain't even saying anything, bro. He ain't even saying nothing at this point. JD may have just won this election for Trump, bro. Walls ain't saying nothing, bro. If you ask Walls a question, the next thing he's gonna talk about is Trump. If you ask, oh fuck. If you ask Walls a question, he's gonna reply with Trump. Why, bro? Can't you just answer the question directly? Answer the question directly, my bro. Answer the question. JD may have won this debate. Not this debate, bro. This election for Trump. This is wild. This is wild. Everybody in the chat is saying, you know what? JD won. JD won. Man, double tap your screen. Subscribe to the channel, man. Walls looks like he is nervous. He wasn't prepared. I don't know how he wasn't prepared, but this is not something that I thought was going to happen. I knew JD was straight up to the point. He is cool, calm, and collected. He speaks directly to the question. He answers the question. He doesn't beat around the bush. But Walls, I thought he was going to do something better. But what is this, bro? What is going on? I never knew Walls would be dragged around the room like this. Man, Walls disappointed his people. I'm sure the Democrats are looking like, Walls, what are you doing? He's just everywhere at the same time. He's not answering the questions. I don't know what's going on, man. Walls really messed up in this one. He really messed. If you watch his rallies, if you watch Walls' rallies, you would see that he actually talks better than this. But now it's like, I don't know, maybe he's intimidated by JD's smooth vibes or smoothness. I don't know. I just do not know. Yeah, Walls ain't. Yeah, at this point, Walls need to. Man, he may have just lost this for Kamala.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance, you oppose most gun legislation that Democrats claim would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles, including AR-15s. So let me ask you, earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, Nora, on that particular case, I don't know the full details, but I certainly trust local law enforcement and local authorities to make those decisions. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience. So we've got to make our schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense bipartisan solutions for how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my office surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment is there, but our first responsibility is to our kids to figure this out. In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence. And this idea that we should just live with it, and here's what I do think, that this is a good start to the conversation. I 100% believe that Senator Vance hates it when these kids, it's abhorrent and it breaks your heart. I agree with that. But that's not far enough when we know there are things that worked. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high gun ownership rate in the country. There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference. It's not infringing on your Second Amendment. And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you out there, do you want your schools hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go? When we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills. They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are things that shouldn't be that difficult. You can still keep your firearms, and we can make a difference. We have to. If you're listening tonight, this breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. And I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's doing okay. Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I appreciate what Tim said, actually, about Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly, weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is, okay, first of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse, or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We unfortunately have a mental health crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially that affecting our kids, it doesn't earn as many headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I was the NRA guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where my shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's not where we live today. And several things I want to mention on this is, talking about cities and where it's at, the number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of children getting guns and shooting themselves. And so we have, and we should look at all of the issues, making sure folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is we start looking for a scapegoat. Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this is one, and I think this is a healthy conversation. I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect our children. That's our priority.
Gentlemen, thank you. Margaret?
Thank you, Nora. Let's turn now to the top contributor to inflation, the high cost of housing and rent. There's a shortage of more than 4 million homes in the United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight, that house is a big deal. I bought and owned one house in my life. My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house, I'm thinking of Christmas services after midnight mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And one of the things, as I said, this program that the Vice President is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do it at the federal level, but local folks make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment assistance. I can tell all of you out there, one of the, certainly for me, using the GI Bill was one thing, but a veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to pay it back, and you're going to pay your mortgage. Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest inflation rates. We've seen a 12% increase in stock because we've put some of these things in, and we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that down payment assistance. We get it back from people because here's what we know. People with stable housing end up with stable jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in, but we can't blame immigrants for the only reason. That's not the case that's happening in many cities. The fact of the matter is that we don't have enough naturally affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes, remove regulation, provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver's paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods, too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, yeah. Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But, Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for a national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants who are competing for those homes, and we should be building more homes for the American citizens who deserve to be here.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, I do want to let you respond to the allegation that the vice president is letting in
Well, of course, that's not true. And again, you have the facts. I guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That, look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But it's, again, blaming and not trying to find the solution. I was going to ask, though, on this question, are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see this, and I worry about this as someone who cares deeply about our national parks and our federal lands. Look, Minnesota, we protect these things. We've got about 20% of the world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a reason. They belong to all of us. But again, this is when you view housing and you view these things as commodities. Like, there's a chance to make money here. Let's take this federal land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor, your time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen, we have a lot to get to. You're passionate about the housing crisis, I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, "I have concepts of a plan." Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. Look, it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%. He introduced pricing transparency. Think about healthcare. You go into a hospital, you try to buy something, and nobody knows what it actually costs. That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice and will also drive down costs. And we talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think this is an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do, but I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better health care policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA, and the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley. 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a lawsuit to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court. And he would have repealed the ACA had it not been for the courage of John McCain to save that bill. Now, fast forward, what that means to you is you lose your pre-existing conditions. If you're sitting at home and you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football, might kick you out. Your kids get kicked out when they're 26. Kamala Harris negotiated drug prices for the first time with Medicare. We have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones that'll be there. But look, this issue, and when Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan, it cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained how you would protect people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said is actually not true. A lot of what happened, and the reason that Obamacare was crushing under its own weight, is that a lot of young and healthy people were leaving the exchanges. Donald Trump actually helped address that problem, and he did so in a way that preserved people's access to coverage who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims about if Donald Trump becomes president, all of these terrible consequences are going to ensue. But in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher. And he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The system works. And the question about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual mandate piece of this. And Republicans fought tooth and nail saying, well, Americans should be free to do this. Well, then what happens is...
So you think the individual mandate's a good idea?
You shrink. I think the idea of making sure the risk pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA where we get people out. Look, people know that they need to be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure then when you get sick and old, it's there for you. Because I heard people say, well, I don't want to buy into Medicare or whatever. Good luck buying health care once you get past 70. So look, the ACA works. We can continue to do better. Kamala Harris did that. The way she made everything better was negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare for the first time in American history.
Thank you. Margaret?
Can I address that?
I apologize. We're out of time. We have a number of subjects to discuss. Margaret?
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world without a national paid leave program for new parents. Governor Walz, you've said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, that's negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family and medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family and medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start, the family works better, we stay in their employers, we get more consistency in that. So Kamala Harris has made it a priority. We implemented it in Minnesota and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue, those big companies are able to offer it. Those of you out there who don't have it, just imagine what happens if you get cancer or your child gets sick. We know what happens. You end up staying home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an economy that Donald Trump has set for the wealthiest amongst us. He's willing to give those tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best when it works for all of us. And so a paid family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go to the families or go to the businesses and ask them. As far as childcare on this, you have to take it at both the supply and the demand side. You can't expect the most important people in our lives to take either our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to make it easier for folks to be able to get into that business and then to make sure that folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, do you support a national paid leave program? And if so, for how long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first of all, Margaret, a number of my Republican colleagues and some Democrats, too, have worked on this issue. And I think there is a bipartisan solution here because a lot of us care about this issue. I mean, look, I speak from this very personally because I'm married to a beautiful woman who's an incredible mother to our 3 beautiful kids, but is also a very, very brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so proud of her. but being a working mom, even for somebody with all of the advantages of my wife, is extraordinarily difficult. And it's not just difficult from a policy perspective. She actually had access to paid family leave because she worked for a bigger company, but the cultural pressure on young families and especially young women, I think makes it really hard for people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young women would like to go back to work immediately. Some would like to spend a little time home with the kids. Some would like to spend longer at home with the kids. We should have a family care model that makes choice possible. And I think this is a very important substantive difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris's approach. I mean, look, if you look at the federal programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the Community Development Block Grant, and there's another block grant program that spends a lot of money from the federal government. These programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your church maybe to help you out with childcare. Maybe you live in a rural area or an urban area and you'd like to get together with families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because, look, it is unacceptable. And, you know, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank you. You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on child care as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this. President Trump recently said, as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kinds of numbers we'll be taking in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, child care options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families, because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, your ticket also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's $5,000 or $6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator Vance and I are that far apart. I'm not opposed to what he's talking about on options. We've done scholarships types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000 in the hole. That's Wharton School. That's his alma mater. And so I think the issue here is, those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime, but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy's growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of every state in the nation, Republicans and Democrats, certified the 2020 election results and sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again seek to challenge this year's election results, even if every governor certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make housing affordable, make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat to democracy than anything that we've seen in this country in the last 4 years, in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by two lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby Kennedy Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard, lifelong leaders in the Democratic coalition. And of course, they don't agree with me and Donald Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues. And that, to me, is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Governor?
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator.
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this. And the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day, some with the American flag. Several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence, and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue, and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling our differences at the ballot box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it, but to deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton in 2016 said that Donald Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I don't understand how we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement, but this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy. The most sacred right under the United States democracy is the First Amendment. You yourself have said there's no First Amendment right to misinformation. Kamala Harris wants to use the power of government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
Tim, fire in a crowded theater. You guys wanted to kick people off of Facebook for saying that toddlers shouldn't wear masks.
Senator, the governor does have the floor.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not anything anywhere other than in Donald Trump's world. Because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that, because of course that's what we would do. So America, I think you've got a really clear choice on this election of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS News vice presidential debate continues.
Thank you for tuning in one more time. You know what time it is. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Let's go. One thing I gotta say is, for sure, Vance, to me, won the debate. No question. Okay. However, Walz picked up a little bit in the second part. Walz picked up in the second part because he saw that, man, if I don't do what I gotta do, I might not be able to sleep home tonight. But Vance won the debate for sure. No conversation about it. No conversation about it. The poll, what's the poll saying? We have 5,400 plus vote in the polls, and 76% of that goes to Trump. Another thing is Walz keeps talking about Trump, and then in some cases he also agrees. He agrees with Vance. In some cases, it's like, yeah, I agree with you. So he's agreeing with Vance. So meaning it's like, you think Trump did a good job as a commander-in-chief. Is that what he's saying? At this point, people, JD has won this election for Donald J. Trump. JD has won the election for Donald J. Trump because he did a very, very good job, a tremendous job, excellent job. Nobody in the chat right now would say that Walz won the debate. Nobody in the chat right now would say Walz won the debate. If you think Walz won the debate, put it in the chat. Put it in the chat right now if you think Walz won the debate. Nobody can say that. Man, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel, man. All right, let me do a poll. Somebody said do a poll. I'm gonna end this poll. I'm gonna do a new poll. Who won the debate? Who won the debate? Let's do a new poll. Who won the vice presidential debate? I'm gonna do a poll right now. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Who won the vice presidential debate? All right. Tim Walz. All right, here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, you guys are the best. Double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. Let's get it.
Welcome back to the CBS News Vice Presidential Debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So, Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Senator Vance. Thank you to CBS News. And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters. It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you, that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that, too, has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you. And thank you both for participating in the only vice presidential debate of this election cycle. I'm Margaret Brennan.
And I'm Norah O'Donnell. And a reminder, there are just 35 days until Election Day. Please get out and vote. And for all of us here at CBS News, thank you and good night.
JD cemented Heat's point with that closing statement. Now, I don't know what y'all doing, but one thing is for sure, JD Vance, he won. Okay. I don't know what y'all talking about. Yeah, man. JD definitely won. He cemented his points with that closing statement. Now, double tap your screen, subscribe to the channel. You guys are the best. I am absolutely tired. I have been driving all day because of Hurricane Helen. We had to move away from our spot and we got an Airbnb. This is the second Airbnb we're getting. I'm just grateful to God that I am able to do it. Thanks to God Almighty. Thank you so much for tuning in. Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. Instead of looking for perfection, seek for consistency. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for tuning in one more time. Thank you. I gotta go. Never forget. No matter what you're going through, God is with you. No matter what you're going through, God is with you. God bless you. I love you. Never give up on your dreams. Thank you. And JD Vance won the debate.